The days of Luffy being nothing more than an upstart rookie are long gone. His current status as a Yonko cements him as one of the major powerhouses within the One Piece world of today. We've been alongside Luffy for every step of his journey, from the beginnings where he had departed from Dawn Island all the way up until his epic standoff against the world government at Egghead Island. The story of Luffy's journey in the present day is very well known, but Luffy's backstory, however, is something that is far less discussed by people. Throughout the last 1,100 chapters of One Piece, we have occasionally received glimpses into Luffy's childhood before he had set sail from Dawn Island. In this video, I want to piece together all of these scattered sections of Luffy's past in order to form a complete backstory for him. This will be a continuation in my series in which I delve into the various backstories of some of your favorite One Piece characters. This includes the Straw Hats, the Supernovas, the Warlords, and even the Yonkos. So if you want to see the backstory of a specific character, then let me know by leaving a comment under this video. So without further delay, here is Luffy's backstory. So the very early moments of Luffy's life remain enshrouded in mystery. Luffy was born in Fuchsia Village, which is a small port settlement located on Dawn Island. He is the child of Monkey D. Dragon and a currently unknown woman. Dragon had left his son behind while he was still in his infancy. This had left Luffy in the care of his grandfather, Monkey D. Garp. Now this arrangement between Garp and Dragon isn't really revealed to us, as we don't know specifically where Luffy lived during the earliest parts of his life, as well as who had taken care of him while Garp was on duty. Garp trained Luffy during this time with the intention of molding him into becoming a strong marine in the future. His methods were somewhat abusive, with him throwing Luffy down a ravine in order to escape on his own, leaving him in the wild to fend for himself and tying him to a balloon and letting him float away, and having him fight against groups of monkeys in the forest being just a few of the trials that he had forced Luffy to face. Honestly, this does remind me of how Piccolo had trained Gohan during the Saiyan arc. So this insane training routine had persisted until Luffy was 6 years old. While Garp was away from Dawn Island as he was carrying out his marine responsibilities, Redhead, Shanks and his pirate crew had found themselves stationed at Fuchsia Village. Luffy had instantly become fascinated by the group, with the crew's sniper Usopp frequently telling Luffy stories of his son Usopp, who was also the same age as Luffy. As Luffy grew closer with the Redhead pirates, he had started to hear more tales of their time on the seas, as well as the glory of adventure and freedom that comes along with being a pirate. Luffy had then decided that he had wanted to join the Redhead pirates. After Shanks and his crew were in Fuchsia Village for approximately 1 year, Luffy had then decided to prove to all of them that he was tough enough to be a pirate. He had done this by stabbing himself under his left eye as the crew had watched on in horror. In order to celebrate Luffy's bravery, the crew headed over to Makino's party bar, where Luffy had unsuccessfully continued trying to get Shanks to let him join them. Shanks refuses Luffy's request to join his crew, well, because he is simply too young. Luffy then notices a chest with an unusual looking fruit inside of it. Luffy's curiosity and his large appetite led him to eat the fruit, which in fact was a devil fruit known as the Gomu Gomu no Mi. It was then that a mountain bandit named Higuma had entered the bar alongside his gang as he demanded that they be served some sake. The bartender and owner of the bar, Makino, informed them that the Redhead pirates had already drank all the sake that they had available. Though Shanks did offer to give them the last bottle, Higuma accepted the bottle only to smash it against Shanks' head. Shanks and his crew had started to laugh as they started to clean up the mess. Revolted by their cowardice, Higuma continues to abuse Shanks before leaving with the rest of his gang. Luffy is outraged by the fact that Shanks did not fight back. He tries to storm out and confront Higuma as Shanks grabs onto his arm to stop Luffy, but this causes Luffy's arm to stretch to unimaginable lengths. The crew quickly realize that Luffy has eaten the devil fruit that they had recently stolen, as it's then revealed to Luffy that he would now never be able to swim for the rest of his life. Not long after this, the Redhead pirates departed from Fuchsia Village, while Luffy began to learn how to adapt to his new rubber body. However, one day while Luffy was sitting in Makino's party bar, Higuma and his gang returned. Luffy, who was still enraged at how he had treated Shanks, had decided to pick a fight with the gang, but predictably he ended up losing. Just as Higuma was about to kill Luffy, the Redhead pirates intervened, having just arrived back at the island. Lucky Roo shot and killed a member of the bandits who had threatened to shoot Shanks. This is before Ben Beckman takes on and comfortably defeats the rest of Higuma's men by himself. Seeing how bad the situation has become for him, Higuma throws a smoke bomb in order to distract the crew as he then escapes to the sea with Luffy. As he enters into deeper water, Higuma kicks Luffy overboard, leaving him to drown. Following this, a Sea King who is known locally as the Lord of the Coast arrives and devours Higuma and his boat in a single bite. The beast then turns its gaze towards Luffy, but before it can cause him any harm, Shanks arrives and moves Luffy out of the way before he scares away the Sea King with his Conqueror's Haki. This rescue attempt came at a massive cost, however, as in the process of saving Luffy, Shanks ended up losing his left arm to the Sea King. This sacrifice had left Luffy feeling heartbroken. Later on, the Redhead pirates would decide to depart Fuchsia Village for good, with Luffy no longer wishing to join their crew and instead intending to set sail on his own. Shanks teased Luffy for being too weak to be able to do so, to which Luffy had declared that he would be the one to become the Pirate King and bring together a crew that is even stronger than Shanks' crew. This statement made Shanks begin to view Luffy in a new light, as he then handed over to him his straw hat, telling Luffy to return it back to him once he becomes a great pirate. While we don't know specifically what caused Shanks to do this, he later goes on to tell Silver's Rayleigh that Luffy said the exact same words as Goldie Roger. We don't know which words he was referring to, but Luffy's parallels with Roger, especially during his childhood, are something that Oda has occasionally highlighted and drawn attention to. Now, I won't focus on this too much here because it's not really relevant to the main One Piece manga, but during the Redhead pirate's stay at Fuchsia Village, Luffy developed a close friendship with Shanks' daughter Uta, something that was revealed during the technically canon events of One Piece Film Red. So after the Redhead pirates had departed, Garp was unhappy to find his future marine grandson, who has now dreams of becoming a pirate. He had then taken him up to Mount Colubo to put him under the care of Curly Dadan. Garp introduced Luffy to Podcast D Ace, another child under Dadan's care, who immediately took a disliking to Luffy. I have a separate video on my channel where I've covered all of Ace's backstory, where it's told through his perspective, so definitely go and check that video out so you have a full picture of what happened during this period of time. Each day, Ace would leave the Dadan family hideout, heading out into the forest surrounding Mount Colubo in order to explore and hunt. Luffy began attempting to follow him on these excursions, which Ace took an offense to. In response, Ace began obstructing Luffy, placing obstacles in his path, knocking down trees in order to crush Luffy, and tricking him into becoming lost and trapped in the forest. Eventually, Luffy managed to overcome Ace's attempts and made his way over to Grey Terminal, a junkyard that is filled with both the unwanted goods and people of the neighboring Goa Kingdom. There, he found Ace alongside a boy named Sabo as they were counting money from a hidden stash of treasure. When Luffy revealed himself, Ace and Sabo captured him as they discussed killing him in order to maintain their secret. Despite coming up with the suggestion, neither of them was willing to end Luffy's life. At this point, Porchemi, a member of the local dominant pirate crew, the Blue Jam Pirates, was walking through the forest, causing Ace and Sabo to hide. Porchemi found Luffy and took him back to his base in order to interrogate him about the money which Ace and Sabo had stolen from the Blue Jam Pirates. Ace and Sabo immediately assumed that Luffy would reveal the location to them, as they rushed quickly for the next few hours, relocating all the money that they had acquired. Once they had done so, however, they noticed how unusual it was that Porchemi still hadn't returned to their original spot in order to try and take back their money. They then realized to their horror that this must mean that Luffy didn't reveal the location to them. We are shown that Luffy had refused to answer any of Porchemi's questions, leading to him beating up Luffy nearly to the point of death with a pair of spiked gloves. Ace and Sabo finally arrived to Luffy's rescue, with Sabo freeing him while Ace took on and defeated Porchemi. This incident caused Ace to come and accept Luffy, with the trio becoming close friends known throughout the Goa Kingdom for the trouble that they had caused. Now, everything comes to a head one day when they ran from a restaurant in Goa without paying. Now, at the restaurant, an unknown man called out to Sabo as they were escaping. Luffy and Ace then pressured Sabo into telling them who the stranger was, as Sabo reveals that the man was in fact his father, as we learn that Sabo is one of the members of the noble families within Goa. Sabo then went on to explain more of his personal past, telling Ace and Luffy that he ran away from his family due to their preoccupation with maintaining their status, and how Sabo has differing views on matters of slavery and the importance of people. Sabo, Ace and Luffy then shared their dreams for the future with one another as they decide that they would set sail as pirates in order to achieve their dreams once they turn 17. This moment here is another that displays a significant parallel between Luffy and Roger, and it was incredibly adapted into episode 1015 of the anime. Now, with the three boys' dreams shared amongst each other, they then exchanged sake cups in order to become swan brothers, solidifying their bond. The three of them would now become closer than ever, adventuring throughout the mountains and forests, fighting the fierce beasts of the island and improving their abilities. The group had fought against each other 100 times every day, with Luffy being unable to win a single fight against either Sabo or Ace. This was mainly due to his inability to attack properly because of his devil fruit. Now, before long, Sabo's past ended up catching up to him, with his father paying the Blue Jam pirates to capture Ace and Luffy in order to force Sabo to return to his family. Reluctantly, Sabo agreed to return on the condition that the Blue Jam pirates do not harm Luffy and Ace. Sabo's vacancy caused some tension between Ace and Luffy as the pair argued over whether Sabo would truly want to return to them or not. Blue Jam also coerced the pair into helping him and his crew with some menial tasks, like moving boxes to different locations around Grey Terminal. A few days later, Blue Jam informed the pair that they would be using the boxes, which are filled with explosives and flammable items, to assist with burning down the Grey Terminal on the orders of the nobles within Goa. Ace and Luffy were understandably horrified by this as they consider the number of people who would be killed as a result of this. They refuse to continue helping as Blue Jam then asks them the location of their treasure chest, which they also refuse to provide. This causes the pirates to tie them to a pole within the terminal. As night falls, the Blue Jam pirates set Grey Terminal ablaze, with Ace just barely being able to free himself on Luffy as the flames begin to surround them. The Blue Jam pirates had also found themselves trapped within the Grey Terminal after being betrayed by the nobles, then confronted the pair demanding the location of their treasure. The pirates quickly overpowered both Ace and Luffy, but before they could deal a killing blow to Luffy, Ace knocked out almost the entirety of the crew with an explosion of Conqueror's Haki. This allowed enough time for the Dadan family to arrive, having entered the terminal as they were searching for Ace and Luffy. While Luffy made his escape with most of the family, Ace and Dadan had stayed behind to fight Blue Jam. Luffy, along with the rest of the Dadan family, spent the whole night on Mount Kulubo worrying about the pair's safety, until they had managed to return the following day, heavily injured but still alive. Thankfully, they were able to defeat Blue Jam, but Luffy's delight at his brother's safety would be short-lived as they soon learned that Sabo had been shot down and killed by a celestial dragon while he was setting out to sea. Luffy was distraught at the loss of his brother, and he had fled to the coast where he spent the whole night crying. Ace came for him the next morning, and Luffy made him promise that he would never die, swearing that they would get stronger. For the next 7 years, the pair trained and adventured together, honing their skills and improving their abilities. Luffy finally managed to become adept at using his devil fruit, being able to use his stretching for long-range attacks. At the age of 14, Luffy had bid farewell to Ace, who set out to sea following his 17th birthday. Ace had left Luffy behind in order to train for the next 3 years on his own. Upon turning 17, Luffy said his goodbyes to the Dadan family and the people in Fusha village before setting sail out onto his own adventure. But this wasn't before getting revenge on the Sea King, who almost took his life many years ago and had taken the left arm of Shanks. Luffy's story from here on out is something that we are all well aware of, so I hope that you've explored this deep dive into the lesser explored part of Luffy's life. We've reached the point of the video where I want to hand over the discussion to all of you. What do you think about Luffy's backstory? Personally, seeing Luffy's reaction to the supposed death of Ace is something that always brings me to the verge of tears, especially when he makes Ace promise to him that he isn't going to die. This backstory is revealed to us following the death of Ace in Marineford. These words are just so impactful, it's just heart-wrenching. I'd love to know all of your thoughts about Luffy's backstory, so continue the discussion. If I've missed anything about his past, then let me know in the comments. Roronoa Zoro is one of the most popular characters in the entire One Piece story. He is a former pirate hunter turned key member of the Straw Hat Pirates. In this video, I'm going to be exploring his incredible lineage, his swordsmanship, and the many fan theories that have emerged surrounding his backstory. By the end of this video, you're going to have gained insights into his connections to the prestigious Shimotsuki family of Wano country and the legendary samurai Shimotsuki Ryuma. So join me as we uncover the backstory of Roronoa Zoro. Make sure to stick around until the end of the video, where I'll be sharing some exclusive details details about Zoro's family tree revealed by One Piece's creator Ichiro Oda himself in a recent SBS section. Trust me, you don't want to miss out on what Oda has revealed. Roronoa Zoro, the fearsome pirate hunter, plays a crucial role as the swordsman and main combatant within the Straw Hat Pirates. Known as the unwavering right-hand man to Captain Monkey D. Luffy, Zoro's fierce loyalty and unparalleled swordsmanship have cemented his position as a force to be reckoned with. Having started his journey as a bounty hunter, Zoro later became the first member to join Luffy's crew, marking the beginning of an unforgettable adventure during the Romance Dawn arc. Born within East Blue, Zoro's ancestry is nothing short of remarkable. He is the son of Terra and Roronoa Arashi, the grandson of Shimotsuki Furiko and Roronoa Pinzoro, as well as being the great nephew of the esteemed Shimotsuki Ushimaru. This lineage connects him to the prestigious Shimotsuki family of Wano country and the legendary samurai Shimotsuki Ryuma. Zoro is also known for creating and mastering the three sword style. He had honed it during his formative years in Shimotsuki village. Zoro stands as one of the three most formidable fighters amongst the Straw Hats. Alongside Luffy and Sanji, they form the indomitable monster trio, with Zoro fiercely pursuing his dream of becoming the world's greatest swordsman in honor of his late childhood friend Kuina. The world knows Zoro not only as a Straw Hat member and former bounty hunter, but also as a member of the notorious Worst Generation. This group of infamous pirates, which includes the likes of Marshall D. Teach, converged at the Shibondi Archipelago with bounties exceeding 100 million berry just before the monumental Summit War. Over the course of Zoro's journey, we have seen his bounty skyrocket, as he had started off with a 60 million berry bounty following the Arabasta arc. Then the events at Enies Lobby had raised his bounty to 120 million berry, and after the Dressrosa arc it had soared to 320 million berry, and in the aftermath of the epic raid on Onigashima, Zoro's bounty now stands at an astonishing 1,111 million berry. It's a testament to his incredible prowess and his relentless pursuit of his ultimate goal. Zoro was born 21 years ago in East Blue to parents Terra and Roronoa Arashi, both from the Shimotsuki lineage. Fate had dealt him a cruel hand as he had lost his father in a fierce battle against pirates and his mother to a merciless illness. He was left an orphan as Zoro had found solace in the Shimotsuki village dojo, immersing himself in swordsmanship to the point of renouncing his past life. As a prodigy in combat, the young Zoro's prowess had surpassed that of most adults, but he could never outmatch Kuina, the daughter of the dojo master Koshiro. Encouraged by Shimotsuki Kozaburo, Kuina's grandfather, Zoro had received two swords and continued on his relentless pursuit for victory. After 2,000 defeats, Zoro had challenged Kuina one last time, using real swords instead of wooden ones. Despite his unwavering determination, Zoro once again had tasted defeat. In a very heartfelt moment, Zoro had tearfully shared his dream of becoming the world's strongest swordsman with Kuina. She had reciprocated by revealing her own ambition, which she believed unreachable due to her gender. The two young swordsmen vowed that one of them would attain the coveted title of the world's greatest swordsman one day. But heartbreak had struck the very next day as Kuina had tragically lost her life in an accident, and in order to honor her memory, Zoro had sought Koshiro's permission to inherit her sword, the Wado Ichimonji, and he had then integrated this sword into his iconic three-sword style. Driven by an unwavering resolve, Zoro set out on a quest to find and challenge Dracul Hawkeye Mihawk, the world's current greatest swordsman. His journey was fraught with challenges, as he became lost and unable to return home. To survive, he had hunted down bounties, earning the moniker Pirate Hunter in both East Blue and the Grand Line, where he had caught the attention of Baroque Works. Zoro's fearsome reputation led the criminal organization to extend an offer for him to join as a numbered agent. He boldly responded by demanding leadership of the entire organization, to which they had refused. A tense showdown had ensued, resulting in Zoro eliminating Mr. Seven, the agent who had approached him. Fate would eventually lead Zoro to Shell's Town, where a chance encounter with Axe-Hand Morgan's arrogant son Helmeppo had changed the course of his life, as he had ended up protecting a young girl named Rika from Helmeppo's menacing pet wolf. Zoro had inadvertently set the stage for his unforgettable alliance with the Straw Hat Pirates. Now, I want to discuss the fan expectations regarding their theories surrounding Zoro's backstory in One Piece, particularly during and before the Wano arc. While some fans had speculated that Zoro might be a descendant of a great Wano samurai, others had disagreed, fearing that this would undermine Zoro's dedication and his hard work. Instead, they had suggested suggested that Zoro's dojo master could be an exiled samurai or the descendant of one, which would explain various aspects of Zoro's training and background. I'd read one theory which had explained that Zoro was born in Wano just a year before the Kozuki family tragedy, and he could be a surviving descendant of Ryuma, their national treasure. However, who transported him from Wano to East Blue remains a point of debate amongst fans. While some believe that Zoro's birthplace to be the flower capital of Wano, others connected him to the Shimadzuki family and village. Before the Wano arc, several theories had emerged about Zoro's past, including the possibility that he was raised as an orphan in East Blue, with his ancestry tied to Ryuma. The connection between Zoro and the Shimadzuki family became clearer throughout the series, as more details about their history was revealed. There were also theories about Zoro's connection to various other characters, such as Shimadzuki Ryuma, Shimadzuki Ushimaru, and Shimadzuki Yasui. Some fans speculated that Zoro's mother may have been on the ship that had brought Wano's culture to East Blue, giving birth to Zoro there. Others wondered if Ushimaru is a direct descendant of Ryuma, with the possibility that he could be Zoro's father, who had sent his wife and son away before facing imminent danger. Zoro's swords had also played a significant role in fan theories. Shusui, a treasure of Wano, was given to Zoro after he had defeated the skeleton samurai Ryuma. Wado Ichimonji, another one of the 21 great grade swords, was crafted by Shimodzuki Kozaburo, Kuina's grandfather. Sandai Kitetsu and Enma were two other swords in Zoro's possession, and they were also created by renowned swordsmiths with connection to Wano. In conclusion, before the Wano arc, fans had many expectations and theories about Zoro's backstory. While some ideas focused on his connections to the great Wano samurais, others had delved into his relationships with other characters and the origins of his swords. Overall, these theories and expectations contributed to the anticipation and excitement surrounding the exploration of Zoro's past within the Wano arc. Following the Wano arc, some fans were left disappointed by the lack of revelation about Zoro's history, especially considering that other Straw Hat crew members like Nami, Sanji, Chopper, Robin, and Usopp had dedicated arcs to their backstory. Many theories had emerged before the Wano arc, ranging from Zoro's potential connections to Wano samurai, his possible ancestry tied to Ryuma, and even relationships with other characters like Shimadzuki Ryuma, Shimadzuki Ushimaru, and Shimadzuki Yasui. Fans had high expectations, and the lack of answers to questions like who were Zoro's parents, what are his ties to Wano, and how is he linked to the Shimadzuki had left some fans feeling very let down. However, it is essential to consider that not every character needs a complicated backstory to be engaging and interesting. As one fan had mentioned, Sanji's past works well in explaining his character and his quirks, but for Zoro it may not be necessary. Usopp, for example, doesn't have a particularly deep backstory, but he remains a beloved character. There is a lot of charm in simplicity, as seen with Luffy's desire for freedom. Now, it's crucial to acknowledge that while some fans may have been disappointed with the lack of Zoro's backstory within the Wano arc, it doesn't mean that his character development is lacking. There is still room for Oda to explore the existing information about Zoro's past and how it shapes him as a character. The focus on Zoro's dedication and hard work, along with his unwavering ambition, makes him a compelling figure, even without having a complex backstory. Although the Wano arc didn't deliver the extensive backstory that fans had anticipated for Zoro, it's essential to remember that not every character requires an intricate past to be captivating. Zoro's commitment to his goals and his growth as a swordsman are already compelling aspects of his character, and perhaps simplicity in this case can be even more impactful. Now, while we didn't get any information about Zoro's past revealed during the Wano arc, we did however get some new information revealed about his lineage during a very recent SBS section with Oda. In the latest SBS section of volume 105, an unexpected disclosure about Zoro's heritage has been revealed. For years, Zoro's lineage had remained a secret in One Piece, but now Oda has finally decided to shed some light on the swordsman's family tree. So let's dive into the recent revelations and see how they tie into Zoro's ancestry. Oda had decided to make this astonishing announcement about Roronoa Zoro's lineage through the SBS section instead of integrating it directly into the manga. Oda admits that he had no plans to delve deeper into Zoro's ancestry within the manga, which had left many fans feeling unsatisfied. However, he has now put an end to the mystery by revealing a comprehensive family tree of Roronoa Zoro. According to Oda, Zoro's family comes from Wano, and he is also related to Shimodzuki Ryuma. Oda explains that 55 years ago, a ship had set sail from Wano country with Shimotsuki Furiko on board, who was in fact the elder sister of Shimotsuki Ushimaru. 3 years later, the ship had arrived in East Blue, where they had vanquished the bandits terrorizing a village. 10 crew members decided to settle in the area, and they had then founded Shimotsuki Village. Shimotsuki Furiko eventually married a local swordsman named Roronoa Zoro, and they had a child named Roronoa Arashi. Arashi had later married Terra, a bandit's daughter, and together Roronoa Arashi and Terra had become the parents of our beloved swordsman Roronoa Zoro. Tragically, Arashi ended up dying in battle, and Terra had passed away due to an illness, thus leaving Zoro as an orphan. Zoro had then joined the dojo established by the Shimotsuki family, where he had met his cousin Shimotsuki Kuina, who had later sadly died in an accident. Zoro's grandmother Shimotsuki Furiko was a descendant of Ryuma, the legendary swordsman of Wano, thus making Zoro a relative of the god of the blade. During the Thriller Bark arc, Zoro had encountered Ryuma, who had been resurrected by Gecko Moria using Brook's shadow. During their meeting, it was evident that Zoro and Ryuma had numerous similarities, such as their physical appearance as well as their fighting ability. Until the SBS section of volume 105, no confirmation had been made regarding Zoro's family tree, but despite the apparent physical resemblance between Zoro, Ryuma and Ushimaru, the connection between the three was not entirely clear. In the fan-translated SBS question segment, Oda had stated that there was no need to elaborate further on Zoro's lineage in the manga. He had confirmed that Zoro is indeed a descendant of the Shimotsuki family, and he had provided all of the known information about his ancestry in this SBS section. Zoro's connection to this incredibly powerful samurai might explain part of his extraordinary abilities. Now this sums up everything that was revealed about Zoro's family tree. Some fans are upset that this information wasn't included during the Wano arc, while others believe that it wouldn't have added any significant value to the storyline. Some fans argue that Zoro has never shown any interest in his ancestry, and thus revealing his heritage in the manga versus doing it in an SBS section wouldn't have changed his character development or the course of the events which had unfolded during the Wano arc. Zoro's journey has never been about uncovering his family history or having a secret connection with a legendary hero. Instead, Zoro's story revolves around personal pride and the promise that he had made to his deceased friend Kuina, which had ended up shaping his worldview. One Piece constantly reminds us that a person's birth does not dictate their standing within the world, and it is their individual will that determines the extent of their ideologies and success. While some fans may be disappointed that Zoro's lineage wasn't explored in more detail during the Wano arc, others appreciate the fact that his character remains true to the themes of One Piece. In this video, I've gone over nearly every piece of information about Zoro's backstory, and in all honesty, there is still so much left for Oda to reveal if he wants to. We've discussed his incredible lineage and connection to the prestigious Shimotsuki family of Wano country, as well as the legendary samurai Shimotsuki Ryuma. We've delved into fan theories and expectations surrounding his past, as well as the disappointment that some fans had felt after the Wano arc had wrapped up. But through all of this, one thing remains clear: Zoro's story is one of personal pride, dedication, and a promise to his late childhood friend. Despite not having a proper backstory, Zoro's journey towards becoming the world's greatest swordsman is a testament to his unwavering ambition, and I for one cannot wait for him to see his dream actualized. Whenever the question arises over who the most important member of the Straw Hat crew is, I always tend to have an answer that is different to many. Naturally, with the exception of Luffy, without whom the Straw Hat Pirates wouldn't exist, the most common answers are always Zoro, with his responsibility as the crew's first mate, and his great strength. Sanji is another popular Straw Hat for his cooking ability and comparable strength. There's even Robin for her vast experience and ability to read poneglyphs, and even Franky is very popular amongst fans, without whom the crew would not have the incredible ship the Thousand Sunny that they sailed the seas on. Franky is literally responsible for giving the Straw Hats one of the most advanced ships in the entire One Piece world. Now, when it comes to my answer for who is the most important member of the Straw Hat crew, I believe it to be Nami. Her role within the crew, at least before Franky and eventually Jinbei had joined, was to be the Straw Hats navigator and helmsman. She was responsible for keeping the Straw Hats alive while traversing the fierce seas of One Piece. Now, this is one opponent that only Nami is able to fight, and if at any point she had lost the battle against Mother Nature, it would have undoubtedly spelt the end of the Straw Hat Pirates. It must be remembered that the reason that the Grand Line was referred to as the Pirates' Graveyard was not simply because of the strength of the Marines, or the terror of the Yonko, or even the power of the Warlords. It was due to the vast number of unexpected, unexplainable, and absurdly powerful weather phenomena that acted as a death sentence for inexperienced sailors. I feel it is not an exaggeration to say that without Nami, the Straw Hat Pirates would have fallen before even reaching the Grand Line, with their ship capsizing and ultimately being destroyed when attempting to traverse Reverse Mountain. During the present day, Nami has advanced to become far more than a simple yet vitally important navigator for the crew. Her loyalty to Luffy and his dream were demonstrated to beyond any doubt in a fight against Ulti during the Wano arc. Her strength was shown to be significant with her climate control abilities combined with the raw power of the homie Zeus, who she had stolen from Big Mom. This thundercloud, who was created from a soul fragment from Big Mom, had demonstrated incredible feats during the Whole Cake Island arc. And as already mentioned, Nami's knowledge has ensured that every island, every climate, and every disaster that the Straw Hats have encountered has been one that they are capable of conquering. But in this video, I would like to take a step back and to focus not on the present Nami, but on her past. The story of Nami didn't begin with Luffy. Through her backstory, we understand the reasoning behind her actions during the early portion of the story when she was first introduced. And Nami's backstory is so pivotal to the plot that it was the entire focus of one of One Piece's greatest early story arcs, Arlong Park. So in this video, we'll be covering Nami's past all the way from her conception within Eiichiro Oda's mind to her departure from the Baratie as a suspected traitor to the Straw Hats. Without further delay, this is the backstory of Nami. The past of Nami is linked to the origin of how her character was created. Oda had taken a great amount of inspiration from Silk and Anne, two of Oda's earlier characters from his one-shot manga Romance Dawn, which, as you can likely tell from the name, provided a considerable amount of its concepts towards early One Piece. Nami was born in the Oikot Kingdom, a small country in the East Blue that 20 years ago was embroiled in a war when the island was attacked by a group of pirates. The ensuing conflict between the pirates and the Marines decimated the island, with the pirates managing to murder a large number of the population. Among the deceased were the parents of a young girl named Nojiko and an infant named Nami. While the two were not related, Nojiko had rescued Nami and had gone to search for help with her. Now this help would come in the form of a wounded Marine officer called Bellamia, who had in fact been a part of the contingency sent to eliminate the pirates and to protect the citizens. Bellamia would flee from the Oikot Kingdom with Nami and Nojiko, taking the two girls back with her to Kokoyashi Village, a village located within the Konomi Islands, and the village in which Bellamia was born. The group one by one would fall ill as they were forced to travel through a storm to make it back to the island, where Bellamia would demand that the girls be treated before herself. She would then ask the villagers not to register the girls with the world government, instead choosing to adopt the pair of them herself. Nami and Nojiko would grow up on Bellamia's Mikan Grove on Kokoyashi, with Bellamia selling their Mikans as the family's main source of income, following her retirement from the Marines, in order to look after her children full time. Now this would only provide a small amount of income for the family, with Bellamia mainly surviving off of eating her own Mikans, so that she could afford food for Nami and Nojiko. As a child, Nami had developed a love for cartography and navigation. This had ultimately led to her dreaming of drawing a complete map of the entire world. Bellamia would be supportive of Nami's goal, however, their poor financial situation had meant that Nami would attempt to steal the books that she would use to learn from. Now while Bellamia would scold Nami for her actions, it did nothing to diminish her faith in Nami of one day achieving her dream. Unfortunately, the family's happiness would quickly be impacted by their relative poverty, as Nami had struggled to understand why they were unable to afford the things that they had wanted. This situation would only be exacerbated as the price of Mikans had dropped and the family's situation had worsened, which Bellamia had hidden from her children. This would eventually culminate in a fight between Nami and her family, where her anger at only ever receiving Nojiko's hand-me-down clothes would lead to her yelling that Nojiko wasn't her real sister. This caused Bellamia to slap Nami, which only worsened the situation, as Nami went on to yell about Bellamia not being her real mother, and that she would have been far
happier if she had been adopted by a rich family instead. With tensions high, Bellamy had told Nami that she could go wherever she had wanted to, causing her to leave. Nami had fled into the village where she had met with Genzo, Kokoyashi village's sheriff. She informed him that she had run away from home, which caused him to laugh given that she was only minutes away from her home. Here, Nami had admitted that she had believed that Bellamy would be better off without either her or Nojiko, as they would then no longer be a burden to her financially, showing that Nami understood the family's situation better than she had let on. She also explained that her reputation as a thief and troublemaker had only made Bellamy look worse to the rest of the villagers. Genzo laughed at this as well, and would go on to explain some of Bellamy's past to Nami, notably that when Bellamy was Nami's age, she was also referred to as a troublemaker. He then went on to explain how Bellamy would eventually join the Marines, leading up to the day that she had returned wounded and ill with both Nami and Nojiko in hand. This had surprised the rest of the villagers. After Nami had learnt about her history and how she had first arrived onto the island, Nami had returned back home with Nojiko. It was at this time, however, that the fishman Arlong, the leader of the Arlong pirates, had come upon Kokoyashi village, and he had demanded a tribute from everyone on the island for them to be allowed to live. The price was set at 100,000 berries for every adult and 50,000 berries for every child. Nami and Nojiko hid in the trees on the village outskirts, watching as the pirates went around collecting the villagers' tributes. Realizing that the group would soon reach their home, the girls had ran to be with their mother. Bellamy had attempted to fight off the group, however she was ill prepared to take on a group of fishermen pirates, especially given that Arlong and some of his members had previously sailed with a powerful crew in the New World called the Sun Pirates. Bellamy ultimately paid Arlong with the entirety of the family's savings, amounting to just over 100,000 berries, knowing that without declaring any payment for them, Nami and Nojiko would end up having to flee the island alone. Bellamy called out to the leaving pirates that the payment was not for herself, but rather for her daughters, declaring that she would rather die than not to be called their mother. With there being no point in hiding their presence any longer, the two girls had rushed to embrace their mother. In order to keep his word and to set an example to the rest of the villagers, Arlong had executed Bellamy in front of her daughters. Upon discovering Nami's skill in cartography, Arlong had forced her to begin working for his crew, hoping to use Nami's talents to map out the entirety of East Blue and to allow him to conquer even more territory. As part of the deal that she had made with Arlong, he had promised that if Nami was able to accumulate 100 million berries to bring to him, he would then free her village. Nami returned to the village now wearing a tattoo of the Arlong pirates Jolly Roger on her arm, and had told the villagers that she was now the cartographer of their crew. This had angered Nojiko, who had attacked Nami, declaring that she would not allow her to be a part of their crew. Nami had then remembered some advice that was given to her by Bellamy, that if she was able to survive through the difficult times, then the good times would come eventually. She had ended up ignoring Nojiko's protests. Genzo advised Nojiko to stop and had informed Nami that she was no longer to set foot in the village, to which Nami had agreed. Nami had left for the grave that had been set up for Bellamy to spend some time alone, but she had encountered Nojiko there as well. They talked about how the marine ships that had been sent by the world government in response to Arlong had all been sunk, and that they would not risk sending any more. Nami had revealed to Nojiko the full extent of her deal with Arlong. In response, she had told Nami that the amount to free the village was far too high for her to accomplish alone. Nami had replied that she couldn't ask anyone for help or there would be a massacre, and that she didn't want people to suffer because of her. Nami began working hard to purchase Kokoyashi village from Arlong, believing that once she had liberated the village, she would finally be able to pursue her dream and to find happiness. For the next 8 years, she made maps for Arlong, while stealing treasure from any pirate crews that she had encountered by pretending to join them before swiftly betraying them. She would hide anything valuable that she had taken within Bellamy's Mikan orchid, as she had slowly attempted to accumulate enough to pay off Arlong and to free her village. It was at this time that she had stolen a map of the Grand Line from the legendary pirate Buggy the Clown, leading to her making an enemy of him and his crew. Knowing that she would be unable to face his crew head on, she manipulates a nearby pirate into defeating his crew for her, and this pirate of course was called Monkey D. Luffy. What would follow was Nami's standard process of joining a crew only to betray them in the future, while stealing as much treasure from them as possible. The only issue on this occasion was that she had genuinely grew to care for the crew around her. This had made her decision to betray them far harder than any other, yet ultimately her desire to save her village had won out. The treasure that she would steal from the Straw Hats would finally provide her with enough funds to buy back her home, something which proved to be far harder than she had initially thought. The events that follow with Nami and the Straw Hats' eventual conflict conflict against the Arlong pirates is something that I'm sure that you will be all too familiar with. Throughout the entire history of One Piece, very few characters have ever been referred to as deities. These are godlike beings whose mere existence elevates them above others. The Celestial Dragons are one of the most prominent examples, while both Enel and Doflamingo were regarded by themselves and others as the gods of their respective territories. Even within the Straw Hat crew, Luffy himself possesses a devil fruit that enables him to assume the form of the sun god Nika. However, in this video we will be discussing a very different god, one whose title was bestowed upon him by a devoted legion of followers in recognition of his incredible strength and divine appearance. Yes, this video is going to be dedicated to the backstory of God Usopp. Usopp had made his debut within chapter 23 titled Captain Usopp Enters. This was released way back on the 12th of January 1998, and ever since then Usopp's character has grown and developed with every single story arc, garnering more and more fans along the way. In recent times, Usopp has become a formidable warrior in his own right, employing his divine sharpshooting skills and quick thinking in order to aid his crewmates in any confrontation that they may encounter. Usopp provides the comedic relief within the group as he provides the audience and his fellow crewmates with hilarious gags and one-liners. But he's not just a one-dimensional character, he also serves as the strategist of the crew, utilizing his intelligence and creativity in order to devise plans and to solve problems. This ultimately helps his crewmates out of dangerous situations that they often encounter. Usopp acts as one of the voices of reason within the Straw Hat crew, frequently questioning Luffy's impulsive decisions and being known to think ahead for the safety of everybody. Despite being one of the physically weaker members of the Straw Hats, he has proven himself time and time again that his unique set of skills makes him an essential part of the crew. However, the brave warrior of the sea that Usopp currently sees himself as is a far cry from what he had started off as way back in Syrup Village. The growth of his character exemplifies how even the weakest amongst us can develop into heroes in their own right, but for the journey to take place one must start at the very beginning, which is what I'll be exploring today. Yes, in this video I'm going to be delving into the past and backstory of God Usopp, discussing his humble beginnings as a mischievous child with a reputation for lying, all the way up to his decision to solidify his resolve and embark on a life-changing adventure as a pirate alongside his captain Monkey D. Luffy. This of course is a continuation of my video series where I delve into the past and backstories of some of your favorite One Piece characters, including the Straw Hats, Supernovas, the Warlords, and even the Yonkos. In order to begin Usopp's story, we must first look even further back in time, approximately 2 years after the Pirate King Goldie Roger was famously executed in Logtown. At this time, former cabin boy and future Yonko Red-Haired Shanks had appeared on Gecko Island in the East Blue. He had been searching for a man named Usopp. After eventually finding him, Shanks had proposed that Usopp join his crew, which at this point was only in its infancy. Usopp had initially refused, but Shanks was persistent, and just over a year later, following the birth of his son, Usopp, at his wife's insistence, had left home in order to pursue his dream of becoming a pirate. His son Usopp would grow under the care of his mother Banchina in Syrup Village, within the Gecko Islands. While still young, his mother would fall seriously ill, often being left bedridden for extended periods of time. In an effort to lift his mother's spirits, Usopp would lie that pirates were coming to the island, and he would create a sense of false hope, both within himself and her, hoping that Usopp would be returning to see them. He promised his mother that Usopp had said that he would take them out to sea with him as soon as her condition had improved. His mother was able to see through Usopp's lies, however, saying that while she had never regretted marrying him, she had known that Usopp wouldn't be coming back home. Usopp's lies had continued, telling his mother about a legendary medicine that could cure any illness, and it was just on the other side of the sea, but his efforts of lifting his mother's spirit were in vain. Banchina, knowing her illness would soon take her, had told her son that it was only a dream, to which Usopp had responded, "Of course I have dreams, I'm the son of a pirate." Not too long after this, his mother had passed away. Usopp was now orphaned, and he had continued on with his lies, yelling throughout the town every morning that pirates were coming, hoping that someday his words would be true and his father would indeed return for him. But unfortunately, he never did. His lies were so consistent that the villagers had started to use his cries of pirates arriving as an alarm clock, signaling that it was
was time to start work and to begin the day. Some would even chase after Usopp armed with weapons and yelling threats at him, but for the most part the villagers had gotten used to his antics, with some of them expressing worry and concern if he was ever late with his morning yelling. Approximately 5 years before the start of the One Piece timeline, Usopp had encountered 3 young children from Syrup Village called Ningen, Tamanegi, and Piman. They were aware of Usopp because of his notorious reputation, and for the most part they had believed most of his lies. Usopp had proclaimed himself to be a pirate to the boys and had declared them to be members of his crew, which he had named the Usopp Pirates. Together they had gone on adventures across the island, fighting off a Cerberus, which was in fact just a regular dog, a dragon, which was a normal sized lizard, and they were stealing apples from aliens, which was just the local stall owner. Aside from Usopp regularly lying that pirates were going to attack and his adventures with his crew, he had also spent time with a local young girl called Kaya, making up stories to entertain her while she was confined to a room due to a sickness. While Usopp's loss of his family was a tragedy that had plagued his early childhood, his life was mostly uneventful until he had turned around 17 years old, and this had marked the start of the One Piece series that we know. The Straw Hat Pirates at this point in the timeline had consisted of Luffy, Zoro, and Nami. They had stopped by at Syrup Village in order to search for a ship following Nami's reveal that the tiny vessel that they were currently using would be unable to make it to the Grand Line. Tamanegi had run through the forest to warn Usopp about the approaching pirates, who immediately had tried to run away in fear. However, when he had learned that it was only a small vessel with 3 pirates, his fearless nature had emerged, and he had left to intercept them. Usopp had stood before the Straw Hat crew, declaring himself as the head of a huge pirate fleet and the leader of the village, with over 80 million followers at his command. Naturally, Nami had immediately called him out on his lie, which had shocked Usopp. The Straw Hats had then proceeded to the village unhindered by Usopp's efforts, and this is where they had quickly befriended Usopp. He had told the Straw Hats that the only place on the island that would have a ship was the large mansion, and the owner of the mansion was the young girl called Kaya, whom Usopp had befriended. Kaya had lost her parents a year ago because of sickness, which had left her as the owner of the mansion and its fortune, despite her own ill health. Usopp and the Straw Hats soon found themselves in a confrontation with Klahadore, Kaya's head butler at the mansion, who had insulted Usopp for being the son of a pirate. Enraged by this, Usopp had attacked the butler before leaving for the coast in order to spend some time alone. Luffy had followed him and had revealed that he had recognized Usopp due to his similarities to his father, whom Luffy had known well from the year that he had spent with Red-Eyed Shanks and his crew on Dawn Island. However, it was at this point that Luffy and Usopp had recognized the butler, who was revealed to be a vicious pirate known as Kuro. He was speaking with his accomplice, the hypnotist Django, and it was about their plan to assassinate Kaya and to have Kuro inherit her fortune. Now, this plan had been in the works for the past 3 years, with Kuro posing as Kaya's caretaker and building up his reputation within the village so there would be no suspicion if she were to die in an accident and incidentally leave everything in her possession to Klahadore. Django had managed to hypnotize Luffy here, causing him to fall down to the beach below. While both Kuro and Django had assumed that this had killed Luffy, his rubber body had actually saved him. Kuro then allowed Usopp to flee, knowing that even with the knowledge of their plan, no one would believe Usopp. And this had proved to be true, with Usopp trying to warn the villagers of Kuro's incoming attack, but none of them had believed him, assuming that it was another one of his lies. He had literally become the boy who cried wolf. Usopp's attempts to warn Kaya and save her from her fate were also ineffective, with Kaya mistakenly believing that Usopp was trying to kidnap her. Realizing that he couldn't convince anyone, he had decided to lie to his crew about the approaching pirates in an effort to protect the young boys from harm. The only others on the island aware of Kuro's plot were the Straw Hat Pirates, whom Luffy had informed once he had awoken from his hypnosis-induced slumber. The crew had decided to help Usopp and to save Kaya, which they initially did by setting up traps in anticipation of the attacking crew's arrival. However, the group had miscalculated. They had set up an oil trap that was leading up to the island from the shore where they had overheard Kuro and Django speaking. Unfortunately, the Black Cat Pirates instead had landed on the northern side of the island. Nami had realized that their own ship was docked there and the treasure was at risk, and she had immediately headed for the other shore. This had led to Zoro falling into their own trap and becoming stuck on the shore. Usopp had followed Nami, intending to hold off the attacking crew before they could reach the village, and Luffy, while being the fastest amongst them, had gotten lost on the way there and had ended up in the village. Usopp and Nami had tried their best to hold off the crew, first through deception, then through traps, and finally by directly fighting them off, but they were quickly overpowered. However, before they could be killed, both Luffy and Zoro arrived onto the battlefield and had started fighting the crew in their place. Realizing that they were up against strong opponents, Django had hypnotized hypnotized his crew by brainwashing them into a berserker mode, which had made them ignorant of their own wounds and had also resulted at them fighting at full strength. Unfortunately for him, Luffy was also under this hypnosis, which had resulted in him beating the crew. Django was forced to hypnotize Luffy to fall asleep in order to stop his rampage. This had led to him dropping the bow of the Black Cat ship, which he had managed to rip off with his hands onto the unsuspecting crew. This commotion alerted the ship's guards, the Nyaban brothers, Buchi and Sham. Sham ended up attacking Zoro, stealing 2 of his swords at the start of the fight. Before the brothers had started to fight together, utilizing a range of team attacks. Zoro had refused to let Usopp and Nami get involved in the fight, worried about what would happen if the brothers had turned their attention towards them. Nami in response tried to retrieve Zoro's swords, but was struck down by Django. Before the fight could continue, Kuro himself arrives onto the battlefield, and he's annoyed at his crew's delay in carrying out his plan by not attacking the village at dawn as they had agreed. Kuro was disgusted to see his former crew unable to defeat a group of children, and after he demonstrates that he is capable of instantly killing the Nyaban brothers if he had wished, he gives his crew an ultimatum, telling them to defeat their opponents within the next 5 minutes or else he's going to kill everyone. Nami had taken advantage of the distraction caused by Kuro's arrival in order to successfully steal back Zoro's swords, and to wake up Luffy in the ensuing chaos. At this point, Kaya had arrived, having discovered Kuro's treachery from one of her wounded servants. While she had offered all the money in her possession for Kuro to leave without any more violence, he had refused, saying that he wants to keep his peace of mind by ensuring the death of Kaya, so that there would be nobody there to report him after he makes off with her fortune. He goes on to remind Kaya of all of the help and friendship that he had offered to her over the past 3 years, stating that it had meant nothing for him, and that he had spent the entire time waiting for the moment that he could kill her and to take her fortune. Usopp had tried to attack Kuro in order to defend Kaya, but he was completely outmatched. He was only saved by an attack from Luffy, which had managed to knock Kuro down. Kuro was then attacked by the 3 young boys from Usopp's crew who had just arrived, but he had simply brushed off their attack. He had ordered his crew to take Kaya and to flee into the forest, where they were pursued by Django. Usopp attempts to chase after them, but his body was unable to move due to the damage that he had taken. Despite this and the fact that Kuro had told him he was no match for Django, Usopp had declared that he didn't care if he would end up losing, because he intends on protecting Kaya and his crew no matter what. Zoro had become motivated after seeing Usopp's resolve, and he had defeated the Nyaban brothers and had carried Usopp with him into the forest after Kaya. Luffy had then taken on Kuro in order to prevent him from following the group. He had scolded him for his desire to distance himself from his previously infamous name. Before Zoro and Usopp could catch up, however, Django had found Kaya and the boys. Despite initially being tricked by them, he had soon defeated them. Yet Kaya had resisted his hypnosis by refusing to open her eyes. She only relented when Django had begun attacking the children, at which point she had promised to write a will leaving everything to Kuro as long as they let the boys go unharmed. Django had accepted the terms, but before he could kill Kaya and have her will come into effect, Usopp and Zoro finally arrived. Despite the great distance between them, Usopp had used his sniper skills to dispatch Django and to save the group, after Zoro had cut apart a section of the forest in order to give him a clearer shot. Now, during this time, Luffy had defeated Kuro, making his 3-year plan and the island's invasion by the Black Cat pirates a complete failure. Despite their success in saving Syrup Village, Usopp had decided not to reveal the thwarted pirate attack to the villagers, as he was worried that it would be too upsetting for them. He had ordered everyone to keep it a secret, to which Kaya and his crew had agreed to. Feeling newfound confidence following the event, Usopp had disbanded his pirate crew, wishing the boys the best in achieving their own dreams, as he declares that he is going to set out to sea and to begin his own pirate journey. However, before he could depart on his new adventure, Luffy had invited him to join the Straw Hat crew, to which Usopp had happily accepted. Now, with a new crew member and a new ship called the Going Merry, which was provided by Kaya as a thanks for their help, the Straw Hat pirates leave Syrup Village in order to continue their voyage towards the Grand Line. Usopp's character journey is one of the most compelling and heartwarming within One Piece. From his humble beginnings as a lying, cowardly young boy to his current status as a brave warrior of the sea, Usopp has grown and developed in ways that never fail to impress and inspire his fans. So whether if you're a long-time fan of One Piece or just getting into the series, I hope that this video has given you a deeper appreciation for the man known as God Usopp. The Whole Cake Island arc had presented us with a fascinating look into Sanji's backstory that we had never seen before, with the information revealed playing a pivotal role in Sanji's character arc throughout Wano. With these revelations now established, we are able to plot the entirety of Sanji's life from
from the circumstances surrounding his birth as a prince to the powerful Germa Kingdom of the North Blue, all the way to the present day with his role as one of the wings of the future Pirate King. While his adventures after he had joined the Straw Hat Pirates are well documented, in this video I want to talk about Sanji's past. We're going to go over all of the events and actions that led to the Prince of a North Blue Kingdom becoming a chef who would work for a former pirate on a floating restaurant all the way in East Blue. This is the story of Vinsmoke Sanji. To start his story, we first need to understand more about his family, specifically his father. Vinsmoke Judge is the patriarch of the Vinsmoke family, the royal family of the Germa Kingdom. Long ago, the Vinsmoke family had ruled the entirety of North Blue, but in the present day they have declined to becoming the rulers of just a single kingdom. And this kingdom, however, was rather special because it exists solely on the sea, much like Gecko Moriar's floating island, Thriller Bark. The Germa Kingdom was so advanced that it was commonly referred to as the Kingdom of Science, a title that it had well and truly earned. This reputation was earned due to Judge's leadership, as he himself was a world-renowned scientist specializing in genetics and engineering. He was so skilled, in fact, that in his younger years he was part of MADS, a scientific institute headed by Dr. Vegapunk. During this time, he had assisted with the discovery of the lineage factor, the blueprint of all life itself. This scientific breakthrough had changed the very landscape of science within the One Piece world, and eventually had allowed for the creation of artificial devil fruits through the efforts of Vegapunk and Caesar Clown. Judge, however, decided to go down a different path, using this discovery to advance the cloning technology that would eventually build the majority of the Germa Kingdom's military force. So with all of this context, we can now finally move on to how this links back to Sanji. Before Sanji and his three brothers were born, Judge had decided to use his knowledge to genetically engineer his children to have superhuman strength and abilities, while also removing their emotions. His intention behind this was to create children who would become the perfect super soldiers. They would be capable of leading the Germa Kingdom's armies while also being strong enough to conquer entire kingdoms on their own. However, his efforts were ultimately sabotaged by his wife, Sanji's mother. Vinsmoke Sora had disagreed completely with her husband's attempts to modify their unborn children, and while pregnant with them, she had consumed a drug that was intended to reverse Judge's genetic engineering and to allow her children to grow as normal humans. Unfortunately, the drug was only successful with one of the kids, Sanji, while severely weakening Sora beyond recovery as one of its side effects. A few months later, the Vinsmoke children were born: Ichiji, Niji, Yonji, and lastly Sanji. From an early age, Judge had begun training his children to capitalize on their enhanced genetic potential. Naturally, Sanji had continuously and significantly lagged behind his brothers in training due to his comparatively weaker body. This had led to his siblings ostracizing him, frequently bullying him, because they had seen his lack of genetic enhancement as a weakness, as well as the fact that Sanji actually has emotions. Judge had also encouraged the bullying by being disgusted by Sanji's lacking abilities in comparison to his brothers. Sanji's only solace came in the form of the two women in his life, his mother Sora and his older sister Reiju. Reiju was sympathetic to Sanji's treatment, but she would do nothing to prevent it, and she had even taken part in bullying Sanji over fears of her family turning on her otherwise. But when everything was said and done, she would still treat Sanji's wounds when nobody was looking. Their mother Sora, on the other hand, was unashamed in her display of love for Sanji, despite the fact that her weakened state had left her bedridden. Sora was the one who was responsible for inspiring Sanji's love for cooking, when she had praised his ability after he had cooked a meal for her, proclaiming that from now on she would only eat food that Sanji had made for her, despite the fact that Sanji's initial attempts at cooking were less than successful. Now, Sanji's passion for cooking was deemed as a distraction by Judge, who had viewed cooking as a waste of time, because Sanji could have spent that time attempting to close the gap between him and his brothers. At some point during Sanji's childhood, when he was between 6 to 8 years old, his mother Sora had passed away, leaving Sanji feeling even more isolated. Without the protection of his mother, and with Judge becoming increasingly disappointed with Sanji's lack of progress and his inability to develop superhuman capabilities, Sanji's father had decided to effectively erase his son's existence from the Germa Kingdom. A state funeral was declared where it was announced that Sanji had passed away in a tragic accident, when in reality he was locked away in the Vinsmoke Castle's dungeon with an iron mask placed over his face in order to hide any possible association with the Vinsmoke family. He had remained imprisoned for the next 6 months, kept in almost complete isolation and permanently trapped in his mask with the exception of when he was fed. It was during this time that Sanji had learnt about the supposed existence of the All Blue, when it was spoken about within a cookbook that he had received to pass the time. dream. This fabled sea had provided little consolation to Sanji, however, whose desperation was only growing as time had passed. Eventually, his siblings came to learn of Sanji's fate and would then visit him in the dungeons only to continue their torment of him. Reiju would again remain the only one to show Sanji any kindness, continuing to treat any wounds that he had sustained after his brothers would beat him, but she would always clarify that she could do no more than this to help him, and she was ultimately not on his side. Shortly after, the Germa Kingdom had crossed into East Blue in the name of conquest, as Sanji had revealed to Reiju that he had still held onto his dream of becoming a chef, as well as his desire to desperately run away from the kingdom. Deciding that she would help Sanji one final time, Reiju had ripped open the bars to Sanji's cell, allowing him to escape. He had ran through the Germa Kingdom castle trying to find his route to salvation before coming across his father. Judge, seeing what Sanji was aiming to do, was delighted that the problem of his failure son would soon finally be solved, and he had actually allowed Sanji to leave on the one condition that he would never tell anybody of his association with the Germa Kingdom for as long as he lives. Sanji would find an opportunity to escape while the Germa Kingdom was attacking the island of Corsia, with Reiju directing him to a cruise ship known as the Orbit. Sanji had boarded the ship and renounced the Vinsmoke name and his status as a prince. He had remained on the Orbit for the next 2 years, working as one of the ship's cooks, until one day when he was 10 years old, the Orbit had come under attack by the pirate Red Leg Zeph and his crew. During this attack, both crews were caught in a sudden storm, and with both ships being lost at sea, the only known survivors were Sanji and Red Leg Zeph himself. Zeph had actually rescued Sanji from the sea after hearing him call out his dream to see the All Blue before the storm had consumed them. The two eventually had washed up on an isolated rock high above the sea. Unfortunately, this isolated rock was devoid of any other life, and with no vegetation, animals, or way to descend and reach the sea, they had no access to food. Zeph had distributed the remaining rations between himself and Sanji, with Sanji receiving a smaller portion since he was only a child, and so he wouldn't need as much food. The following weeks were spent in relative isolation, with both parties remaining on their half of the rock. Eventually, after reaching the point of total starvation, Sanji had decided to attempt to kill Zeph and to steal his food for himself. When he had tried to act out his plan, however, he had found himself unable to kill Zeph, and in a fit of rage he had slashed open the sack containing Zeph's rations, only to find that there was no food inside and only treasure. Zeph had in fact given Sanji the entirety of the rations they had all those weeks ago, and in the time since had survived by amputating and eating his own leg. Zeph had revealed to Sanji that he had previously experienced starvation from his time sailing the seas, and incidentally he had dreamed of one day opening a floating restaurant that could ensure no sailors would ever suffer from such a thing again. Sanji, who had felt guilty over his plot to kill Zeph, was inspired by his story, and he declared that he would help Zeph to succeed. Shortly afterwards, they were saved when a passing ship had spotted the two of them, and after suffering through that ordeal for many weeks, they were finally saved. It was because of this experience that Sanji had vowed to never refuse food to a hungry individual, regardless of whether if they were good or evil. Following their rescue, Zeph went on to purchase the Bharati, which of course was the floating restaurant that he had dreamed of owning, with Sanji joining him. It was at this point that Sanji had taken up smoking, hoping that it would impress Zeph and prove that he was man enough to work alongside him. While Zeph never stopped him from smoking, he wasn't impressed by this. Sanji would work on the Bharati for the next 9 years, vastly improving his cooking abilities and his physical strength under the tutelage of Zeph. He would end up learning his signature kick-based fighting style based off of Zeph, who himself had used a similar style which had earned him his title of Red Leg Zeph. Sanji's aversion to using his hands in combat was a byproduct of both his mastery of his fighting style as well as wanting to protect his hands because they are a crucial tool that he requires for cooking. He would happily remain as part of the Bharati up until the day the restaurant was saved from being captured by the failed New World pirate Don Creek. Thanks to the intervention of a rookie pirate called Straw Hat Luffy, Sanji's story from then on is one that I'm sure that you're all familiar with. However, the importance of Sanji's backstory doesn't end here, as an interesting point to consider regarding Sanji's childhood and its impact on the current storyline is the apparent success of Judge's genetic alteration. While Sora's sacrifice to prevent any manipulation is something we have covered in this video, something that I have yet to touch upon are the Vinsmoke's raid suits. These raid suits are special, technologically enhanced outfits designed for combat. They were created by Judge and restricted biometrically specifically for use by the Vinsmoke family, and it wasn't until the Whole Cake Island arc that Sanji had finally received his own bespoke suit, which he had then gone on to use within Wano against Page 1. However, after he had used his raid suit for the second time, Sanji had no noticed that his body was feeling different. This was revealed to be as a result of the unlocking of his genetic enhancements that had been suppressed since his birth, and it can only be assumed that this was a byproduct of the utilization of his raid suit interacting with his body on a biological level. The results of these enhancements were very significant, and they were showcased during his fight against Queen during the climax of the Wano arc while the raid on Onigashima was going on. Now his body had shown extreme potent healing abilities, recovering from being crushed by one of Queen's attacks in only a matter of seconds. We then got to see him demonstrate a drastically increased body toughness when Queen had surprise attacked Sanji with full strength on the back of his head, with his sword almost having no effect. It had even resulted in Queen's sword shattering. On the other hand, Sanji did experience some side effects associated with this new improvement, with it being suggested that Sanji was displaying signs of losing emotions. One, he had seemingly forgotten that he had attacked a woman, something that he had long since sworn not to do. This revelation led to Sanji ultimately destroying his raid suit, preventing him from using it again in the future, and potentially descending even further into his originally intended genetic modifications. Is this too late? Have the genetic changes within Sanji's body already started to occur? All of this is yet to be revealed, as we don't fully understand the true depth of the changes which Sanji has undertaken, but based on what we have seen, he could potentially now have the strongest body within the entirety of One Piece. When do you think people die? When they are shot through the heart by the bullet of a pistol? No. When they are ravaged by an incurable disease? No. When they drink a soup made from a poisonous mushroom? No. It's when they are forgotten. This is, without question, one of my favorite monologues in the entirety of One Piece. It's an ode to death, and it's spoken in the last moments of Dr. Hiriluk's life. This speech is remembered over 20 years after the fact by almost every One Piece fan. It truly encapsulates one of the common themes throughout One Piece: the immortality of those whose actions in life render them unforgettable after death. Goldie Roger's incurable disease may have been the indirect cause of his death, yet the golden age of piracy that had spawned from it had ensured that his memory would live on forever. Whitebeard may have ultimately fell to a single bullet, yet his dying declaration that the One Piece is real had signified the start of a new era, and Dr. Hiriluk, condemned to death through an honest mistake, had chosen to die content that he would be remembered by those who he had saved. One of the most popular characters who Dr. Hiriluk had saved was somebody who he had come to view as his own son. I am referring to Tony Chopper of the Straw Hat Pirates. First introduced on the 8th of May 2000 in chapter 134 of One Piece, Chopper is the small lovable reindeer who has been part of the Straw Hat crew since shortly after they had first entered the Grand Line. In the present day, Chopper plays a critical role for the Straw Hat Pirates as their doctor. While his skills are often unneeded, his presence offers a safety net for the unanticipated and often exceptional circumstances that the Straw Hats frequently find themselves in. Even when the situation calls for a more direct solution, Chopper has shown the strength to stand against most opponents that he has ever come across, with the reveal of his Monster Point form being one of the most memorable and intimidating moments of the series before the time skip had happened. Following the time skip, Chopper's medicinal skill, physical strength, and personal control were shown to have advanced leaps and bounds from what they were before. And while his naivety and childish personality may be the reason why the other Straw Hats feel very protective towards him, this doesn't stop them from maintaining their faith and trust in Chopper's abilities when the crew needs him the most. Everything that I've spoken about so far is about Chopper in the present day, but in this video I want to take a look back at how Chopper came to be the person that he is today. And to do that, we will be covering his entire backstory and past, all the way from his birth to his eventual meeting with Luffy and the Straw Hats near the beginning of the Grand Line during the Drum Island arc. This is a continuation of my series in which I delve into the various pasts and backstories of some of your favorite One Piece characters, including the Straw Hats, the Supernovas, the Warlords, the Yonkos, and anyone else that you recommend within the comments. Now, Tony Chopper was born 17 years prior to the current point in the One Piece timeline. He was born on Drum Island, located in the Grand Line. Born into one of the many herd of reindeers that make their home on the island, Chopper on the other hand was very different, and he was treated as an outcast, forced to follow the herd from far away in an attempt to avoid any association with them. The reason behind his mistreatment was a minor genetic mutation that had resulted in Chopper having a blue nose. This was a feature that wasn't shared by his parents nor any of the other reindeer in the herd. At some point during his childhood, Chopper had encountered and subsequently ate the Hito Nami, also known as the human fruit, and this had granted him the ability
ability to turn into a human hybrid being at will. Now this had led to the herd ostracizing him even more, which had caused Chopper to now fully understand the negative way in which he was being treated due to an increase in his intelligence. Now let's just pause the backstory for a brief moment, because I think it's worth expanding more upon the unusualness of Chopper's devil fruit and the way in which it had affected him. There are 3 known devil fruits which bear the name Hito Hito no Mi. The first is the one that Chopper had eaten. The second, the Hito Hito no Mi model Daibutsu, which was consumed by the former Marine Fleet Commander Sengoku the Buddha. And the third that we are aware of, the Hito Hito no Mi model Nika, which of course was eaten by none other than Monkey D. Luffy. It seems unusual that the other 2 Hito Hito no Mi devil fruits both happen to be mythical Zoan fruits, while Chopper's is only regarded as a regular Zoan devil fruit. This is especially the case given that Chopper's devil fruit gives him access to multiple different forms, something which no other standard Zoan devil fruit has been shown to be capable of doing outside of awakenings. While this may have initially only been due to the rumble balls that he had developed, his subsequent ability to perform these transformations on command is definitely noteworthy. Additionally, it raises an interesting question of what Chopper's devil fruit would have done had it been consumed by a human, given that its base ability seems to be granting the user with a more humanoid form and an increase in intelligence. I would love to know all of your theories regarding Chopper's unique devil fruit situation in the comments down below, as this may be a topic that I revisit in a separate standalone video in the future. Now, returning to Chopper's backstory, his attempts at independence had initially proved extremely unsuccessful. Believing that his now human hybrid form would evoke some level of kinship with the humans of Drum Island, Chopper had entered the nearby town and had attempted to communicate with the population. This had proved to be disastrous, as the townspeople were terrified of Chopper's form, and then mistaked him for a yeti, even attempting to chase down, shoot, and kill the young reindeer. Chopper fled back into the forest, wounded and distraught at the realization that there was nowhere he belonged, because he was too human to be accepted by the reindeer, and he was too reindeer to be accepted by the humans. Eventually, he was rescued from both his injuries and his heartbreak by the eccentric Dr. Hiruluk, who upon seeing the injured creature took him in. He was the one who had given Chopper his name, accepting him into his life as both a friend and assistant, who had helped the Doctor in his medical endeavors around the island. Although his methods and actions were of dubious medical value, Hiruluk managed to become Chopper's role model, cementing the young reindeer's intention to emulate the Doctor in both his actions and his profession as a doctor. The two slowly developed a father-son relationship with each other, with Dr. Hiruluk teaching Chopper his philosophy on life, that all diseases can be cured. This belief had stemmed from the Doctor's early life, where he was diagnosed with a supposedly fatal illness, only to miraculously be cured. He believed that he was cured by a serene vision of a grove of cherry trees which he had experienced on an island located somewhere in West Blue. This experience had formed his outlook on the possibility of all diseases being curable. It had also led to him returning to the island that he was born on, Drum Island. He aimed to cure what he believed to be a severe ailment, the frozen hearts of the citizens who were being oppressed by King Wapol's rule. After teaching Chopper this belief, he had also spoken of his unwavering faith in the Jolly Roger, which he had viewed as a symbol of vitality and of strength against impossible odds, aligning nicely with his view on diseases. Deciding to live their lives on their own terms, the dynamic Doctor duo would travel house to house around the island, administering often unwanted cures with extreme side effects to the citizens. This action went in direct opposition to the laws implemented by King Wapol, which had banned the operations of any doctors not directly sanctioned by him personally. Also, because I'm struggling to find any justification for it, we'll just ignore the manga-only scene where Hiruluk shoots and presumably kills the wife of one of his patients. Over time, Hiruluk had began to notice his health declining, and eventually had come to the conclusion that the fatal illness which had plagued him in his younger years had returned. Not wanting Chopper to have to suffer the pain of watching his father figure slowly die, Hiruluk began to exclude Chopper from his life. Now, this was only effective until Chopper had learnt of Hiruluk's fate, and he had vowed to find a cure for his mentor. Chopper had recalled a time in which he had overheard a couple of villagers talking about a certain type of mushroom which was supposedly able to heal every type of illness. Chopper then stole Dr. Hiruluk's favorite medical book in order to find this miracle mushroom. After many hours of research, he had finally found the cure that he was looking for, an amyudake. It was a special kind of mushroom, but it was labeled with a skull and crossbones prominently next to it in the medical book. Because of Dr. Hiruluk's praise of the Jolly Roger as a symbol of hope, vitality, and battling against impossible odds, Chopper had had misunderstood the meaning of the skull and crossbones in the medical book, which obviously means that the mushroom is poisonous. Chopper had ventured out to find this mushroom, which only grows on top of a treacherous cliff in a secluded part of the island that can only be accessed through an arduous and dangerous journey. Chopper sustained multiple injuries on this trip, and the most serious of which had occurred when he was forced to cross the territory of his old herd which he had abandoned. While most of the herd was willing to accept Chopper's presence, albeit with some disgust and scorn, the leader of the herd on the other hand was a vicious older male whose forehead was covered in scars from combat. He had wanted to kill Chopper for returning after the herd had cast him out. The elder reindeer had attacked Chopper in a rage, forcing him to retaliate, but Chopper's determination to retrieve the mushroom and to save his mentor had fueled his strength, allowing him to gain the upper hand in the conflict and to knock the leader aside. Believing that he had won the fight with his show of strength, Chopper was ambushed by the leader who had attacked him from behind, wounding him greatly. Resuming their fierce fight, a struggling Chopper once again gained control of the fight and thankfully was able to defeat the leader, thus allowing him to proceed onwards to claim the Amyudake. His injuries by this point were severe, having barely emerged from his journey alive. Chopper had struggled back to his mentor with a broken left antler, dragging a badly broken left leg and covered in many bruises and bloodied wounds. With the doctor's help, Chopper had managed to make a complete recovery, though it had pained Hiriluk greatly to see the extent to which Chopper had suffered on his behalf. Overwhelmed with gratitude from the lengths that his son had gone to in order to give him a chance of survival, Hiriluk had eaten the Amyudake mushroom, fully aware that doing so would end his life. It wasn't until later on that Chopper had come to learn about his mistake. When Dr. Hiriluk's friend Dr. Kureha would reveal that he had in fact given Hiriluk a fatal dose of poison, Dr. Kureha reaffirms that she is telling the truth and that while Chopper's intentions may have been pure, it doesn't make up for his lack of medical skill when it comes to saving others' lives. Chopper, now accepting that he was the cause of Dr. Hiriluk's death, becomes inconsolable and he is immediately rushed to Drum Castle after Kureha assumed that he was planning to die there. This had turned out to be true, as King Wapol had deceived Dr. Hiriluk into believing that the Ishi-20, his contingent of personal doctors and the only other doctors on the island, had all fallen gravely ill. Understanding that this could prove disastrous for Drum Island, Hiriluk intended to cure the doctors only for it to be revealed that the entire situation had been fabricated in order to lure Hiriluk out and to eliminate him. Realizing that his death was at hand, Dr. Hiriluk had made his legendary speech on the meaning of death, before declaring that he had a wonderful life and he had thanked Chopper for always being there for him. In order to prevent his death from being at Chopper's hands, Hiriluk had committed suicide by blowing himself up with a failed potion. Chopper, having just arrived to save him, was so distraught over the doctor's death that when he had heard King Wapol making fun of him, he had gone berserk and he had charged at the king with a great roar. Chopper was intercepted by Dalton, one of the royal guards, and it is revealed that he was the only one to feel sympathy over Hiriluk's death, and he had shown distaste for the cruelty that Wapol had displayed. Recognizing that Chopper was the son that Hiriluk mentioned in his dying monologue, Dalton tells Chopper that he apologizes for those who had mocked Hiriluk's death, but that if Chopper could not beat him, then he stands no chance at defeating Wapol. This apology had brought Chopper back to his senses as he retreats from the castle. He had then sought out Dr. Kureha and he tearfully begged her to take him on as an apprentice and to teach him to become a great doctor. Thankfully, this aligns with Hiriluk's final wish for Kureha, where he had asked her to take Chopper in. He had then spent the next 6 years with her as she had taught him everything that she knows. Chopper had put all of his effort into his studies, aiming to one day become a doctor as great as his mentor. As his abilities developed, Chopper eventually created the Rumble Ball, which could modify the wavelengths in a Zoan Devil Fruit's transformation ability, granting him 4 extra forms. During one of his experiments where he had consumed 3 Rumble Balls at once, he had inadvertently transformed into an uncontrollable monstrous form, devoid of the intelligence that he had gained since first consuming his Devil Fruit. In this state, he went on a rampage and he nearly wiped out an entire village, but fortunately no lives were lost during this incident. He later awoke to find himself in one of Dr. Kureha's hospital beds, not having any recollection of what had happened after he had eaten the Rumble Balls. After a lecture from Kureha, Chopper had come to understand the danger that this new form had posed to those around him, and he had promised to never unleash this monstrous form again. Shortly before the main One Piece timeline, Drum Island would be attacked by the Blackbeard pirates, which had forced Wapol and his forces to flee the island. In light of their abandonment, Chopper and Kureha had taken up residence in Drum Castle, occasionally coming down from the mountain to seek out anyone in need of medical treatment. island. This routine would continue until the day in which a young man would ascend the mountain, carrying the bodies of his two ill friends on his back. From there, Chopper's life would change drastically, starting with the liberation of Drum Island and the young reindeer joining the Straw Hat Pirates on a journey across the Grand Line and the New World, encountering warlords, admirals, yonkos, and all manner of foes on an adventure to the throne of pirate supremacy. But this is a story that I'm pretty sure you're all aware of.
Nico Robin goes by many names within the world of One Piece. She is referred to as the Devil Child. She is known as the archaeologist of the Straw Hat Pirates. She's the wielder of the Hana Hanonomi, the last surviving member of the Scholars of Ohara, and she is the only person living that we know of who is capable of reading the poneglyphs. Her abilities and knowledge make her one of the most sought after people within the One Piece world. She is wanted by the world government. She is also wanted by a former warlord turned pseudo Yonko Crocodile, a dethroned Yonko Big Mom, as well as a actual Yonko Blackbeard, and lastly, even the Revolutionary Army are looking for her. But her loyalty ultimately lies with her savior, the man who had declared war against the entire world just so that she could have the freedom to choose her own path in life, and the one who had finally convinced her to abandon her fears of the past and to cement her will to live towards a brighter future. Ever since she had committed her entire being towards helping her savior, Luffy, achieve his goal of becoming the Pirate King, she's offered the Straw Hat Pirates a service that nobody else is capable of imitating, with her ability to understand the poneglyphs and eventually decode the mystery behind the location of the fabled Laugh Tale, and along the way, no doubt, discover the true history of the world, as well as the mystery surrounding the legendary ancient kingdom. But everything that I've just talked about is Nico Robin's present, as well as her possible future to come. What we need to analyze within this video to understand a character is her backstory, the events and circumstances that had ended up shaping her life and had led her to her introductory role as the de facto second in command of a warlord terrorizing a country and searching for a weapon that can cause mass destruction. And this is exactly what I'm going to do in this video. We'll be exploring the entire history of Nico Robin's character, from her humble beginnings growing up and studying as a scholar on the island of Ohara, all the way up to her service for the Desert King Sir Crocodile. So let's start at the very beginning, on the West Blue Island of Ohara, which was also referred to as the Island of Scholars, a title that it had well and truly earned. It was the home to the Tree of Knowledge, a 5,000-year-old tree housing the cumulative knowledge of some of the greatest scholars and archaeologists in existence. And approximately 30 years before the present day of One Piece, it was also the birthplace of Nico Robin. Robin's mother had left when she was still very young, setting out on an expedition alongside a group of other archaeologists to research the poneglyphs. Due to her father passing shortly after she was born, this had left Robin in the care of her uncle and his wife, the latter of whom frequently abused Robin both mentally and physically. She remained with them for the next 6 years, during which she at some point ate the Hana Hanonomi, a devil fruit which has given her the ability to reproduce her body parts onto any surface. And as is often the case with devil fruit users, this had led to her being ostracized by the majority of the people within Ohara. The parents had told their children to avoid her, and this was especially damaging to Robin, as her devil fruit had given her the ability to reproduce her ears, which she had frequently used to eavesdrop onto others and to hear what they were saying about her. Fortunately, Robin did find companionship within the Scholars of Ohara, and in particular with Professor Clover, the director of the Ohara Library and a close friend of Robin's mother, who had looked out for Robin and taught her during her mother's voyage. It was thanks to his teachings that Robin at the age of 8 had sat and passed the archaeology exam, which is required to become a scholar of Ohara. Unfortunately, Robin's interest, similar to her mother's, was drawn to the unrecorded history of the world, which has surrounded the poneglyphs. Her incredible talent had led to her teaching herself how to decipher the poneglyphs. Professor Clover, knowing the danger associated with that knowledge from his days as an adventurer, had tried to dissuade Robin from continuing down this path, even threatening to ban her from the library if she didn't listen. Robin was heartbroken at this perceived betrayal, and she ran crying to the beach, which is where the pleasant part of Robin's past pretty much ends. Sometime before this, Robin's mother was captured by the Marines and charged with researching forbidden knowledge surrounding the Void Century. All who joined her on the expedition were killed, and it was only through the sympathy of a Marine Vice Admiral called Jaguar D Sol that she was able to escape a similar fate to her crew. This was the same Jaguar D Sol who shortly afterwards was shipwrecked in a storm and had washed up on an isolated beach, which of course ended up up being the island of Ohara, where he had met and befriended a young girl named Nico Robin. Now, to provide a bit more context on the events surrounding Nico Robin's mother, who is in fact very influential for being behind one of the key tragedies within Robin's life, we need to understand just why the world government was so angry with her. The forgotten history, the mystery surrounding the Void Century, and the ancient kingdom are considered taboo knowledge as far as the world government is concerned, and they are willing to go to great lengths to ensure that the history remains forgotten. To this end, a Buster Call was ordered to take place on Ohara, intending to destroy all knowledge that could possibly be associated with this past. Evidently, there is something about the historical events that had taken place within the world of One Piece that the Marines do not want to be unearthed. Unfortunately, the scholars of Ohara had also counted amongst this knowledge, and 5 battleships that were manned by future admirals Akainu and Aokiji alongside CP9 had descended upon the island of Ohara. Robin, who had returned to the Tree of Knowledge at this point, was warned by Professor Clover to leave immediately and to deny any association with the archaeologists or to her mother. Unfortunately, Robin had refused this request, which had led to her as well as the archaeologists being rounded up by the Marines, and this was before CP9 had arrived with Robin's gravely wounded mother. All those that were gathered are sentenced to death by Buster Call, which Professor Clover protests. He speaks directly to the 5 elders, who are the second highest level of authority within the entire world government. He had argued the importance of their knowledge before calling the world government out on the history that they are trying so hard to keep hidden. But before he can reveal the government's greatest secret, Clover is shot and killed in front of the young girl who had come to view him as a father figure. And sadly, things don't get any better from here. And most people who have either read or watched One Piece will remember the unforgettable tragedy of Ohara, with it being commonly regarded as one of the greatest backstories in the entire series. Professor Clover's death essentially acted as the catalyst for an already horrific situation to progressively and continuously get worse. The scholars of Ohara were dedicated to the end, and they had died trying desperately to save their legacy, while the Tree of Knowledge had collapsed on top of them following the start of the Buster Call. It's an almost poetic end, as those who dedicated their lives to this knowledge ultimately died because of it, while of course they were trying to save it. Robin's mother was among those lost, but not before she had pleaded with Sol to get Robin to safety. Robin and Sol had made their way back to the isolated beach where they had first met, with Sol protecting her from the attacks from the Marines' battleships. Robin was refused entry onto the evacuation boat that was made for the island's civilian inhabitants, and instead she had boarded onto a raft which Sol had previously built to allow him to leave. At this point, and to the shock and disgust of everybody watching, the then Vice Admiral Akainu had ordered his ship to fire on and destroy the evacuation ship, condemning the entire remaining population of Ohara to death just on the off chance that one of the scholars may have snuck on board. Robin, at only 8 years old, had to watch her entire island, everybody that she had ever known, talked to or laughed with and even loved, die unnecessarily before her very eyes. But even after all of this, there was still one person left, Jaguar D. Sol, the former Vice Admiral who was cast away onto the island of Ohara. He was no match against his opponent that he fought against while trying to rescue Robin. He had ended up rebelling against his close friend Vice Admiral Aokiji. Now, recent chapters of the manga do reveal more information about the circumstances surrounding this event, so I recommend anybody who has not read chapter 1066 to skip to the following timestamp to avoid spoilers. Now, as far as Robin was aware, Sol was ultimately killed by Aokiji, who in an attempt to fulfill Sol's final wish decided to let Robin go free, even creating an ice passageway which protects her from the remaining members of the Marines. Sol's parting words to Robin were that of encouragement, that there was somebody waiting for her out there in the sea. There will be friends who will make her life feel whole again. This had offered very little comfort to somebody who had just lost everything. But something which would be unbeknownst to Robin for the next 24 years, however, was that Sol did not in fact die on that day. Aokiji, whether from kindness or carelessness, had used an attack which was not intentionally lethal to incapacitate Sol. As a result, when Monkey D. Dragon and Vegapunk, alongside what would eventually become the Revolutionary Army, had arrived onto the island days later, he was still breathing and so was capable of being saved. He had helped the Revolutionary Army with the recovery of what had remained of the knowledge of Ohara before setting off to Elbaf, where he would go into hiding from the world government. It is not until the most recent arc on Egghead Island where Robin and the rest of the Straw Hats finally meet with Vegapunk, and she would learn that a dear friend did in fact survive. So with the spoiler talk out of the way, following the destruction of Ohara and learning that Robin did in fact survive, the world government's PR team would go into overdrive, accusing the scholars of Ohara of scheming to use their vast knowledge as a means to acquire the ancient weapons to destroy the world, with Robin still attempting to carry out their will. The destruction of the 6 battleships which Saul had attacked were also attributed to Robin, despite her obviously playing no part in it because she was a child. This is where Robin had earned the titles of the Devil Child or the Demon of Ohara. The world government succeeded in cementing her threat into the minds of the people and to encouraging either her death or capture, as she was assigned a 79 million berry bounty. With this now infamous reputation, as well as the price tag that was now hanging over her head, it would lead to a tragic series of events stemming from her childhood as the years had passed. Anyone who had expressed any care for her and had taken her in would eventually turn on her, betraying her to the world government just so that they could receive the payment in return. Any pirate crew that she had joined would inevitably believe that she had betrayed them when the Marines would start taking far more interest in them. Eventually, the years of heartbreak and betrayal would lead to Robin becoming jaded and distrusting, as she was now betraying the organizations that she was working for before they would have a chance to do the same to her. Now, this cycle of betrayal would continue until Robin was 24 years old, at which point she would meet the Warlord of the Sea, Sir Crocodile, while in Alabasta. Crocodile would need Robin's ability to read the pornoglyphs to achieve his ultimate goal within Alabasta, which was to find the pornoglyph that would reveal the whereabouts of the ancient weapon Pluton, and then to ultimately attain it. Robin would accept and join his organization Baroque Works under the pseudonym Miss Sunday. Ironically, Robin would now be doing exactly what the world government had accused her of nearly 20 years ago, and use her forbidden knowledge in an attempt to access the ancient weapons. Joining Baroque Works had proved to be a smart decision for Robin, as by coming under the effective protection of Sir Crocodile, she was essentially protected from the world government due to Crocodile's status as a warlord. She had remained within Baroque Works for 4 years, presumably assisting with their coup over the Kingdom of Alabasta, all the way up until the day that a rookie crew known as the Straw Hat Pirates had found their way into the country, and well, we all know what happens from there. As I mentioned earlier on in this video, Nico Robin's backstory is one of the most tragic within the entire One Piece story. It's one that I've wanted to talk about and to shine a spotlight onto for quite a while, and with the recent revelations within the One Piece manga linking back to Robin's past, I felt like there was no better time than now to speak about her backstory. One of the most important and often underappreciated parts of any pirate crew in One Piece is the ship. Among the most famous are the Roger pirates with the Oro Jackson, the Whitebeard pirates with the Moby Dick, and even the Redhead pirates with Red Force. And while these are all impressively powerful vessels, they also all conform to the standard conventions of what most people would expect for a pirate ship. Once you start moving beyond that into the more creative concepts, you encounter the likes of Thriller Bark, Gecko Moriar's island-sized behemoth that was capable of capturing entire ships whole, or Trafalgar Law's crew with the Polar Tang, an extremely advanced submarine unlike anything else seen in the One Piece world so far. Even the ships of Blackbeard have been shown to have an unusual design, seemingly created directly from the trunks of vast trees. And yet all these ships pale in comparison to the complexity, speed, luxury, and abilities of the Straw Hat Pirate ship, the Thousand Sunny. It was a ship designed and built by the greatest shipwright in the world, and this individual just so happens to be the topic of this video. I'm of course talking about Franky. This will be a continuation of my series in which I delve into the various pasts and backstories of some of your favorite One Piece characters, including the Straw Hats, the Supernovas, the Warlords, the Yonkos, and anyone else that you recommend within the comments. In the modern day, Franky needs no introduction, being one of the fan favorites since his introduction all the way back in chapter 329, titled My Name is Franky. From there we see his evolution, both figuratively and literally, into the lovable cyborg that had crashed his custom-built car directly into Big Mom's face. His loyalty, strength, and strict moral compass have been a welcomed addition to the Straw Hat crew for almost 20 years now. But in this video, we won't be discussing his present or his possible future relating to his potential importance in the ongoing Egghead Island arc with Dr. Vegapunk. In this video, we will be discussing Franky's past, covering his backstory all the way from his birth up until his first interaction with the Straw Hat Pirates, who he would then go on to join. If you enjoyed this video, then please remember to leave a like and to subscribe to the channel for more One Piece content. Now, Franky's early childhood is something we know comparatively little about. What we do know is that his original name was Cutty Flam, and that he was born on an unspecified island in the South Blue, the sea known for its exotic and odd findings, including its flora, fauna, and customs. His parents were part of a pirate crew and seemingly had taken the young Cutty Flam along with them on their voyages. Considering this information, we can't say for sure if the island that Franky was born on was in fact somewhere he remained for any length of time, or if it was simply the island his mother happened to be on at the time in which she had given birth to him. Regardless of this, there was little love between Franky and his parents, and when he was still young, his parents threw Franky overboard from their ship and had left him to die. It was only good fortune that had allowed Franky to survive this ordeal, as he was rescued from almost certain death by the legendary fisherman shipwright Tom. This would leave Franky stranded on Water 7, though this would in truth end up being a significant improvement on his previous living situation. Franky had become Tom's new apprentice after he had built a functional cannon out of scrap metal and materials that had been discarded and left lying about. It is through this that he would first meet his eventual best friend Iceberg, Tom's other apprentice, with the two very quickly developing a brother-like relationship. In fact, it was Iceberg who had given Franky his now well-established name, declaring that Cutty Flam is a weird name, and that instead he would refer to him as Franky from now on. As time went on, Franky would learn the art of shipbuilding from Tom. However, his passion had stretched beyond the conventional ships that the workers of Water 7 were famous for. Franky's true passion lied in the design and construction of warships that he would affectionately name his Battle Frankies. These vessels were constructed with the intention of hunting and defeating Sea Kings, monsters that would spell doom for an unprepared sailor. He would note his progression in shipbuilding by assigning each of his Battle Frankies a number corresponding to the order in which they were built. Despite Franky's great ambitions regarding shipbuilding, his aspirations remained humble, proclaiming that he wished to create his dream ship, one capable of circumnavigating the world, with himself as the shipwright. Tom was supportive towards Franky's dream, stating that if he was capable of doing that, he would have surpassed him as a shipwright. During this time, Water 7 will be visited by the Roger pirates and the Pirate King himself, Goldie Roger. While the purpose of their visit has not been expanded upon, the crew would interact with Franky's mentor Tom, who was acquainted with the pirate crew due to having built their legendary ship, the Oro Jackson, the only ship to have ever circumnavigated the One Piece world and to have conquered the entirety of the Grand Line. While at Water 7, one of the members of the Roger pirates, Kozuki Oden, would quickly become friends with the child Franky and would even invite him to join the Roger pirates crew on their adventures. Franky would swiftly decline the offer, stating his distrust in pirates because of how his parents had treated him and his refusal to become a pirate himself. Tom's association with the Roger pirates would prove to be a problem when Franky was 12 years old, as he was put on trial for having built Roger's ship, the Oro Jackson. The justification behind his sentencing was pretty flimsy, and it's something that I'll come to later on in the video, as no other shipwright had ever been sentenced in the past based on the crimes of those who had purchased their ships. Nonetheless, Tom had managed to strike a deal with the Marines, and by extension the world government, in order to receive a pardon for his alleged crimes should he be capable of constructing the sea train, the Puffing Tom, within the next 10 years. Now, this sea train was something hailed as a marvel of engineering and a near impossible feat, something that was even directly commented on by Nami when the Straw Hats had used the service themselves. It was effectively a floating train which traversed the sea itself, near impervious to weather or conditions it had faced. The main line had served to connect Water 7 to the government island of Enies Lobby. Tom was successful in completing his end of the bargain, spending 10 years to construct the train and the main first line, and then a further 4 years to construct 3 more lines that the train could use. As such, the Marines were willing to provide Tom with his pardon, thus sparing him from his death sentence. However, at this moment, disaster had struck. Franky, then 26 years old, was framed by Spandam, the leader of the government unit Cypherpole 5, who was after the blueprints for the ancient weapon Pluton, which seemed to have been handed down to Tom through the shipwrights of Water 7. Spandam had used the warships that Franky had built throughout his life to attack Water 7, and although Tom and his apprentice had managed to stop the attack, but because the warships had bared Franky's name, and it being well known that he was the one constructing them, it had appeared to everyone concerned that they were the ones who had organized the attack. Tom, Franky and Iceberg were all sentenced to death, with Franky regretting ever having built his ships due to the damage that they had caused. Tom was enraged to hear this and had tore free from his handcuffs to hit Franky, stating that the act of creating a ship is neither good nor evil, and that even if his ships had destroyed the world, it is the responsibility of those who had built them to always love the ships that they create. After saying this, Tom had declared that he is using the pardon he received for the construction of the sea train to absolve themselves of the crime of attacking Water 7, saving Iceberg and Franky from death, but leaving Tom to receive judgment for the crime of building the Oro Jackson. prison. Tom was escorted onto the sea train by Spandam to be transported to Enies lobby. Franky, desperate to rescue his mentor and father figure, attempted to intercept the train. He stood on the tracks in front of the puffing Tom, hoping to stop the train with his bare hands. Now, unsurprisingly, he was unsuccessful and was run down by the train and presumably killed. Unbeknownst to everyone else, Franky had managed to survive the collision, albeit with significant injuries. To save his life, Franky was forced to reconstruct the destroyed sections of his body, which he had managed to do using materials that he had salvaged from an abandoned ship. To mark his transformation, he had BF-36 tattooed on his shoulders, signifying that he was now the 36th Battle Franky. It was 4 years after his disappearance that he had returned to Water 7, where he was outraged to find that Iceberg is now the head of Galela, a conglomeration of all the previous shipwright companies within Water 7, and he had allied himself with the world government. While the two argued, Iceberg would ultimately give Franky the blueprints to Pluton, one of the 3 ancient weapons and the very thing that Tom was killed to acquire. While Iceberg was driven to tears over the revelation that Franky was still alive, he had requested that he once again leave Water 7, preventing the blueprints from ever being found. However, Franky had refused, saying that it was his decision whether he would leave or not. After leaving his reunion, Franky had ventured out into the back streets of Water 7, where he was attacked by Jinbei and his gang after entering their turf. They proved no match for Franky, whose bodily modifications had greatly enhanced his already considerable strength. After taking over the group's turf, he had recruited Mozu and Kiwi as his next followers, convincing them to swap alcohol for cola. He then took them to the newly made Franky house, where he formed the Franky family, the de facto head mafia family within Water 7. As part of their actions, the family had stolen from incoming pirates, dismantled ships legally or otherwise, and had acted as the main source of muscle on the island. With Franky leading the group, he constantly blamed himself for Tom's death and had decided to spend the rest of his days on Water 7, attacking incoming thieves and looters, organizing all the thugs so that he could keep the city crime in check, and overall protecting the city that Tom had loved so much. He at that point was never able to forgive himself for what had happened to Tom. Despite this, he never gave up on his hopes of one day achieving his dreams and finally building his ideal ship. Because of this, a portion of the money made by the Franky family over the years went towards the purchasing of Adam's wood, the strongest shipbuilding material in the world, and an extremely precious and expensive resource. Approximately 4 years later, Franky would get the chance to complete his dream, when his family had stolen 200 million berries from a lone pirate wandering around Water 7, kickstarting the chain of events that would lead to the epic confrontation at Enies lobby and Franky joining the Straw Hat Pirates. It is safe to say that Franky's backstory is one filled with tragedy, danger, and unyielding hope. As discussed in this video, he has endured numerous trials and tribulations, but his strength and resilience have allowed him to overcome each and every one of them. He has become a beloved character within the One Piece world, and his endearing nature, lovable personality, and catchy catchphrases have ensured his status as one of the most memorable members of the Straw Hat crew.
You can count on your fingers the number of characters who have died since Luffy had set sail on his journey to become the Pirate King. Now, the same cannot be said for some of the backstories that are revealed to us by Oda. One Piece is characterized as having some of the most tragic and memorable backstories in all of shonen anime and manga, with almost every major character having a past that is worthy of its own side story. The past of the Straw Hats are no exception to this, with every single member having experienced loss in their own unique way. I doubt that any character has truly understood the concept of death as strongly as the topic of today's video. The Soul King Brook has experienced death very personally. In the present day, Brook has found his place as a fearless fighter within the Straw Hats. Possibly he is the strongest outside of the Monster Trio and Jinbei. Brook's decades of experience as well as his unique abilities are a product of his devil fruit, which ultimately makes him an irreplaceable member of the Straw Hat Pirates. While Brook plays a massive role within the present timeline of One Piece, in this video I'm going to be talking about his backstory. This is everything before he had first met Luffy deep within the fog of the Florian Triangle. When it comes to Brook's early life, very little is known, considering that we're talking about 90 years before the present timeline. We learned in chapter 489 that prior to his time as a pirate, Brook was the leader of a battle convoy within a certain kingdom. Since Brook and the rest of the Rumbar pirates had originated from the West Blue, we can assume that this certain kingdom was also located within West Blue. Unfortunately, the only revealed islands from this sea are Ohara, which is unlikely to have been Brook's Brook's home, Thriller Bark, which Brook seemingly confirmed wasn't his home, and the so far unseen island of Toroa, which was only briefly mentioned within the Shabondi arc. While we don't know the name of this kingdom or how Brook had joined its military forces, we do learn that it was during this time that he had learned his swordsmanship skills, and that the names of many of his attacks were given to him by his comrades. At some point, for unknown reasons, Brook had eventually left his place as part of the kingdom's army in order to become a pirate. He had joined the Rumbar Pirates as one of the crew's many musicians under his then captain Yorkie. While we don't know exactly when Brook had joined, we know that it was at least 52 years ago, as this was the earliest point in which we have actually seen Brook within the manga. One day, while the Rumbar Pirates were still sailing within the West Blue, their ship had come across a baby island whale who had gotten lost from its pod. Seeing how upset the whale was, Brook had suggested to his captain that they should play some music to cheer the whale up. Since the crew was made up of extremely talented musicians, they managed to play a beautiful rendition of Bink Sake. This very iconic song had lifted both the spirits of the whale and the crew. The next day, Brook and the rest of the crew had discovered that the whale had continued following them. With a new, unexpected but not unwelcome companion, the Rumbar Pirates had continued their adventures throughout the West Blue, now accompanied with Laboon. Laboon would become synonymous with the Rumbar Pirates, cheerfully enjoying any and all songs that the musical crew would sing. The crew had eventually realized that Brook had held a very strong bond with Laboon. Now unfortunately, all good times must come to an end, as the crew would face a major challenge, with the crew intending to enter into the Grand Line but fearing for the safety of Laboon. Since Laboon was only a baby species, they feared that the Grand Line was too dangerous of a place for such a young whale. Their attempts to convince Laboon to remain behind in the West Blue proved to be unsuccessful, even with Brook's personal interventions. Despite the heartache it caused them, the crew even began to ignore Laboon in the hopes that it would force the whale to leave them behind. Their plan seemingly had worked, with Laboon disappearing one day and no longer sailing alongside them. Their success was short-lived, however, as after braving the perilous journey into the Grand Line, their celebrations were gate-crashed when the young whale had re-emerged. It seems as though he had followed them into the Grand Line via Reverse Mountain. Since Laboon had already entered the Grand Line anyway, and because their ship had required repairs following the treacherous path, the crew had continued on with their songs, now joined by the delighted young whale. After 3 months staying at the Twin Capes where the crew had recuperated and fixed their ship, Brook and the Rumbar Pirates finally decided to take their leave and set off fully into the Grand Line. They had decided to leave Laboon under the care of Crocus, who had lived at the Capes also. Before their departure, they made a promise to Laboon that they would come back for him after completing a full circumnavigation of the world. Now by this point, Laboon would have grown big enough to accompany the crew on their remaining adventures. The crew's journey throughout the Grand Line was not an easy one, as they found themselves facing every challenge that the sea had to offer, but not once were they affected, as they had sang through all of their difficulties. Despite the endless optimism of the Rumbar Pirates, eventually the crew had come across a challenge that they weren't able to overcome. While disembarking at a forest on a random island within the Grand Line, the crew's captain Yorkie, as well as several other members of the crew, had caught an incurable and deadly disease. In a sad but incredible display of selflessness, Yorkie had declared that he and the other infected members would leave in order to prevent the disease from spreading. They planned to take the ship and attempt to leave the Grand Line through the Calm Belt, in hopes of finding a path to survival in a different sea. Knowing that he would never make it back to Laboon, Yorkie asked Brook and the rest of his crew to give his well wishes to the whale. This of course is after the crew completes the journey that the captain can no longer make. As Yorkie's condition deteriorated and they prepared to depart, Yorkie asked Brook to send him and the infected off with their favorite song Bink Sake, something that his crew were more than happy to do. With that, Brook and the remaining Rumbar Pirates said goodbye to their captain and some of their closest crewmates. Despite losing half of the crew, Brook and the remaining Rumbar Pirates continued sailing through the Grand Line on a new ship, one far larger than the one that they had previously. Brook was soon appointed as the new captain, and during their further travels through the sea, he had gained his 33 million berry bounty, as well as his moniker Humming Swordsman Brook. While their travels progressed smoothly, they faced another calamity upon entering the Florian Triangle, when they ended up being under attack by an enemy crew. While Brook and some of his crewmates managed to survive the assault, they soon had fallen really ill as their opponents opponents had coated their weapons in poison. With the crew's doctor having died in the initial attack, it quickly became apparent that their situation was a hopeless one. Brook, being aware that he has eaten the Yomi Yomi no Mi and he would revive following his death, he had given one final order to his crewmates, telling them to play one last song that would be recorded on a tone dial that they had previously bought. Brook promised that he would complete the crew's journey after they were gone, and that when he meets Laboon once more, he would play the tone dial for him so that he can hear them singing. Delighted with Brook's suggestion, the crew had drawn upon what little reserves of energy that they had left in order to sing their favourite song once more. Despite the joyous music that they produced, the remaining Rumbar pirates began to slowly succumb to the effects of the poison, and one by one the instruments fell silent, until only one remained. With a heavy heart and remembering the promise that he had made to Laboon, Brook continued playing all alone until he finally succumbed to the poison and died himself. Via the power of the Yomi Yomi no Mi, Brook's soul had successfully returned to the mortal world. However, he immediately faced a massive problem. Due to the fog encompassing the entirety of the Florian Triangle, Brook was unable to find the ship, and therefore his body. As a result, he spent a full year drifting throughout the sea, searching for his body so that he could return into it. By the time that he had found his ship, his body had decayed into a pile of bones, with the exception of his afro thanks to its strong roots. Now returned to the scene of his crew's death, Brook immediately set about collecting the skeletal remains of his crewmates, before storing them in coffins located deep within the ship. Brook's fortunes showed no signs of improving, however, as now returned to his body, he found himself with no way of sailing onwards, as the ship's rudder had been broken in the original battle with the rival pirate crew who poisoned them. For the next few decades, Brook was left all alone aboard a ship, left to the whims of the ocean's currents. Brook attempted to pass the time in any way that he could think of, so he rolled around on the deck, even training himself to lean against a wall at a perfect 45-degree angle, and he had continued to sing and play music. However, nothing that he did could ever fill the void in his heart, and every night when he had gone to sleep, he would dream that his crewmates were still alive, and that they were all ready for their next adventure. Approximately 5 years before the start of the series, Brook's ship had found its way to Thriller Bark, which by now had taken up a home within the Florian Triangle. Hoping to find some materials with which he could repair his ship's rudder, Brook had disembarked and began to explore the island. But to his dismay, he did not find his salvation, but rather the horrific created creatures and zombies inhabiting the island. Shortly afterwards, he was captured by the warlord and captain of Thriller Bark, Gecko Moria, who had used his devil fruit power to steal Brook's shadow before setting both Brook and his ship adrift. Brook was determined to retrieve his shadow, because without it, he would not be able to step into the light of day again. So he had begun retracing his path to the island. Once there, he had encountered Dr. Hogback, and he had interrogated him for the location of his zombie counterpart. With a location now set, Brook ventured on to retrieve his shadow, easily dispatching any and all zombies in his path until he finally encountered his zombie counterpart, the legendary samurai Shimotsuki Ryuma. Ryuma was considered the strongest samurai in the world during Wano's Country of Gold era. This of course was centuries ago. His mastery over the blade is demonstrated by his incredible feat of slaying a dragon, which had earned him the title of Sword God, and presumably a status as the world's strongest swordsman of his time, a rank which his direct descendant Roronoa Zoro personally strives to achieve within the modern day. Brook had proved to be no match for Ryuma, whose superior swordsmanship skills had allowed him to land multiple severe blows to Brook's skull. Sensing his defeat was at hand, Brook had asked Ryuma for mercy. The legendary samurai had granted his request and had let him go, as Brook had fled from Thriller Bark with his shadow unclaimed. It is from this battle that Brook had gained the large crack that is visible across his skull. For the next 5 years, Brook had continued to train within the Florian Triangle, patiently awaiting the day that he would become strong enough to face Ryuma once again. That was until one day when he had encountered an unusual crew also sailing within the midst of the Florian Triangle, and he received an offer of friendship from the man who would go on to become his next captain. This of course was Monkey D. Luffy of the Straw Hat Pirates. Brook's tragic story explains the necessity of emerging from the grief caused by the loss of loved ones, and the truth that once you step out of the darkness that you find yourself in, much like Brook within the Florian Triangle, you can come to appreciate life once more. Brook had spent many years or even decades floating aimlessly with nothing but the memory of his beloved crew to keep him company. He had fallen into a spell of loneliness, but it was broken by one optimistic optimistic rubber pirate who had given him the resolve to forge new friendships and bonds. And by joining the Straw Hat Pirates, Brook was able to face new enemies, and he was able to return to a life of adventure. His dream to finally reunite with Laboon is finally possible, as the promise that he had made 50 years ago will hopefully be fulfilled by Brook. I really hope that you enjoyed this look back through the life of Brook, who at this point is one of the most beloved members of the Straw Hats. We're at the point of the video where I want to hand over the discussion to all of you. What do you guys think about Brook's backstory? I know that I for one was incredibly shocked to see Laboon return into the story via the character of Brook. It was a really unexpected plot reveal, and it makes me look forward to seeing Brook and Laboon reunited one day. If I have forgotten to mention anything about Brook's backstory, then definitely let me know in the comments. Throughout the course of One Piece, we have encountered a whole host of backstories, ranging from the tragic to the heroic, and one character who I feel beautifully encapsulates both sides of the spectrum is none other than the newest member of the Straw Hat crew, the Knight of the Sea, Jinbei. Jinbei was both the last Straw Hat to join the crew as well as the last to be introduced into the story. He had made his debut in chapter 528, and interestingly, until the reveal of Dr. Vegapunk in chapter 1066, Jinbei was the character with the greatest length of time between his first mention and his eventual reveal, being originally referenced in chapter 69, which is a full 10 years before his first official appearance in the manga. In the present day, Jinbei serves a dual role within the Straw Hat crew. He acts as the helmsman during travel and as one of the crew's powerhouses during combat. He is commonly regarded as one of the strongest members of the entire crew, second only to Luffy and Zoro in terms of bounty, and viewed in similar regard to the monster trio of Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji in terms of battle ability. His durability is possibly even the strongest in the entire crew, having taken blows head-on from the likes of Akainu and Big Mom, with only minor injuries to show from it. With his unique mastery over Fishman karate, he has even been shown to be able to take on Yonkos, as was demonstrated during the Whole Cake Island arc, where his attack was strong enough to eject Big Mom from the Thousand Sunny and save part of the Straw Hat crew. In order to understand Jinbei's strength, infamy, and place within the Straw Hat Pirates, we must look back at his past, which many One Piece fans are unfamiliar with. In this video, I'm going to cover everything that Oda has revealed about Jinbei's backstory, from his humble beginnings as an orphan in Fishman Island slums to his official debut in the story, locked away within Impel Down level 6, waiting for the world's fiercest war in a generation to commence. This video is a part of a series where I explore the pasts and backstories of One Piece characters, including the Straw Hats, Supernovas, Warlords, Yonkos, and more. So we begin with the birth of Jinbei, which was around 46 years before the present timeline of One Piece, presumably on Fishman Island. Little is known about his parents or their fate, except that at least one parent was a whale shark, the same species of fishman as Jinbei. He had grown up in an orphanage that would later become the notorious Fishman District. As a child, Jinbei trained at the Fishman Karate Dojo, achieving a level 40 black belt faster than anyone before him. Although strong, the young Jinbei was defeated by Fisher Tiger, who after also defeating Arlong proclaimed himself as the leader of the Fishman District. Jinbei's life following this is relatively unknown, but at some point he had joined the Neptune army and had rose through the ranks, gaining significant status and responsibility. At that time, Jinbei was skeptical of Queen Otohime's push for closer relationships between fishmen and humans, noting her lack of support from the people. His relationship with Arlong was strained as their differing attitudes had caused tension. Jinbei had disapproved of Arlong's rude behavior towards Fishman Island citizens and had confronted him over his harassment of a Neptune army recruit. Despite their differences, both Jinbei and Arlong had admired Fisher Tiger, a renowned adventurer who had frequently voyaged into the Grand Line. Jinbei remained in Neptune's army until about 15 years before the current storyline, when both he and Arlong would resign from the military in order to join Fisher Tiger's pirate crew, the Sun Pirates, who had recently become enemies of the world government after Fisher Tiger's attack on Merijo. As the Sun Pirates' notoriety had grown, Jinbei had received his first bounty of 76 million berries. As a pirate, he used his strength to brutally beat marine opponents, fueled by his resentment towards the Marines and the world government for their indifference to slavery. The Sun Pirates frequently battled the Marines, including a memorable battle against Rear Admiral Kedar's troops. After this battle, Fisher Tiger warned Jinbei and Arlong not to kill humans, as doing so would stoop to their level. He had emphasized that the Sun Pirates' goal was to free the oppressed, rather than becoming cold-blooded murderers. Arlong had disagreed, advocating advocating for instilling fear into humans through ruthlessness and brutality. Jinbei, on the other hand, had sided with his captain, which had silenced Arlong. Fisher Tiger later discussed their goals and Queen Otohime's vision with Jinbei. He was concerned about being perceived as ruthless as Arlong and had hinted at his own inner demons here. As the years had passed, the Sun Pirates continued their adventure, freeing slaves and fighting marines. They had visited an island in the Grand Line where Koala, a former Mary Jo slave, had lived. The island's inhabitants asked the Sun Pirates to take Koala home, which they had agreed to. Jinbei had empathized with Koala, who had displayed signs of trauma from her time as a slave. He made an effort to understand her, and eventually she had warmed up to the crew, and they had grown quite fond of her. Koala's slave brand was altered to display this Sun Pirate symbol, signifying her moving on from her past. Eventually, the crew had found an eternal log post to Koala's home, which was located on Full Shout Island. But after returning her to her hometown, unbeknownst to Koala and the crew, a marine ambush led by Rear Admiral Strawberry was waiting. The marines had been tipped off by the villagers from both islands in exchange for overlooking Koala's former slavery status. In the ensuing battle, Fisher Tiger, who had accompanied Koala, had suffered severe wounds. The Sun Pirates had stole a marine vessel in order to escape, but Tiger's condition had worsened. As the crew had gathered around him, he had revealed his past as a slave. He was tortured by the celestial dragons before he was able to escape. His assault on Mary Jo was inspired by his desire to free others like him. On his deathbed, Tiger's hatred for humans persisted, and he had refused a life-saving blood transfusion from a human donor. Despite the desperate pleas of his crew, he had succumbed to his wounds and died. The crew had struggled after the death of Fisher Tiger. Arlong had started to attack humans and marines until Vice Admiral Borsalino had captured him. Jinbei assumed the role of captain in order to maintain stability and to continue Fisher Tiger's legacy. Under Jinbei's leadership, the Sun Pirates continued their activities but without killing anyone. During this time, Jinbei's bounty had risen to 250 million berries. The world government had invited Jinbei to join the 7 warlords of the sea, which would freeze his bounty and end his status as an enemy of the marines. All of this is on the condition that he cooperates with the government. Despite heavy opposition, Jinbei had considered the offer as a means to strengthen human and fishman relations, and he had discussed his plans with King Neptune. Jinbei had eventually accepted the offer, which had led to Arlong's release. Arlong had grown to resent Jinbei and accused him of disgracing Fisher Tiger's legacy. He then informed Jinbei that he had intended to go back to being the captain of the Arlong Pirates, and that unless Jinbei was going to kill him, he was not going to stop doing as he pleased. This naturally led to a confrontation between the two of them, and predictably, Jinbei had dominated Arlong. A beaten Arlong was then carried away by those who had wished to follow him and join his crew. Jinbei would then express his disappointment at Arlong's inability to truly understand Fisher Tiger's will, resolving himself to the fact that his former friend and comrade had fully embraced a path of darkness. Jinbei's first mate Aladdin had assured him that if Arlong went too far, then they would make it their responsibility to personally step in and to stop him. If you are interested in Arlong's actions after this point, then check out my video on Nami's backstory. Arlong plays a significant role in shaping the character of Nami, and his relationship with Jinbei is addressed when Jinbei eventually joins the Straw Hat crew. Shortly after this, the celestial dragon Donkyo Myosgard was shipwrecked onto Fishman Island. His intentions were to retrieve his former slaves that were freed by Fisher Tiger. Despite his injuries, he had arrogantly demanded their return to Mary Jo. The fishmen, ready to kill him without consequence, were stopped by Queen Otohime. Jinbei and his crew were present on Fishman Island at the time, and they had observed the entire interaction. Queen Otohime had warned her people of the danger of passing their hatred onto their children. Jinbei had then immediately recognized the similarity between her words and Fisher Tiger's. The two of them were mirroring the same ideal but with different methods. The celestial dragon was ignorant of the fact that Otohime had just saved his life, and he had threatened to shoot her. Now, before anyone else could react, all of the people present, including Jinbei, were shocked to witness that Princess Shurafushi had called forth the Sea Kings to her mother's aid. This had rendered the celestial dragon unconscious from shock. After several weeks of treatment, Myosgard was once again healthy enough to leave the island. Otohime had decided to accompany him on his exit. While the people of the island were anxious over their queen's safety, Jinbei was seen reassuring worried children and telling them to believe in the queen. Their fears were ultimately unfounded. Otohime would return from her trip not only safe, but with a letter of support from the world noble towards her efforts in improving fisherman-human relationships. Her success would finally convince the the citizens of Fishman Island to support her ideals, with swaths of the population stepping forward to provide their signatures for her petitions. Her success, however, was short-lived. One day, while preaching her views in the plaza, the box containing all of the signatures had suddenly caught on fire, and in the ensuing confusion, Queen Otohime was fatally shot. Jinbei, who was there at the time, ordered the soldiers to protect the royal family, in case the assassin had more than one target. Following the Queen's death, Hody Jones, a soldier in the Neptune army, had stepped forward claiming to have caught the culprit, who was revealed to be a human pirate. Knowing the effect that this information would have, Jinbei had told Hody to keep it quiet for the sake of the Queen's ideals, but Hody had refused to comply. The revelation that it was a human that was responsible for the death of their queen had stifled the growing support that Orihime had painstakingly built, and instantly the public opinion had returned to one of skepticism and hostility. Unbeknownst to everyone and unrevealed until the Fishman Island arc, the person who was actually responsible for the queen's death was none other than Hody Jones himself. Hody had wished for the conflict between Fishman and humankind to escalate, and he had formed a plan to kill two birds with one stone by both eliminating Otohime, who was the biggest supporter of an improved relationship between the two races, as well as destroying the support of the population by framing a human for the death of their beloved queen. Jinbei alongside Aladdin would attend Otohime's funeral, openly displaying their sorrow over the death of another who had shared Fisher Tiger's ideals and resolve. Jinbei's next noble action would occur approximately 2 years before the start of the One Piece story, where he would come into conflict with the then super rookie Podcast D Ace, who had openly declared his intention to take Whitebeard's life. Jinbei had held a great amount of respect for Whitebeard because he had claimed Fishman Island in his name and had saved it from attacks or interference by either the world government or other ambitious pirate crews. This respect, alongside the companionship that he felt for the Whitebeard crew from his infrequent visits, would result in him willingly declaring himself an enemy to anyone who would wish them harm. Jinbei and Ace would battle for 5 full days, with neither able to gain a significant advantage over the other. Eventually, the pair would collapse from exhaustion, though the fact that Ace was able to immediately rise to fight Whitebeard may suggest that he was just about stronger than Jinbei. Following Ace's eventual decision to join the Whitebeard pirates, he and Jinbei would develop a more friendly relationship. Jinbei's friendship with both Ace and Whitebeard would go on to influence his decision in refusing to answer the call of the world government to take part in the Marineford War, which would have meant that he was going to fight against Whitebeard, his crew, and all of his allies, all to ensure the successful execution of Ace. As a result of his refusal, he would be arrested and sent to the deepest level of Impel Down, where he would find himself locked in a cell with none other than his friend for whom an entire war was about to be waged. And this brings us to the present timeline of the story where Jinbei is introduced to us. I do hope that you've enjoyed this video covering Jinbei's past and backstory. Definitely let me know what you thought about his history in the comments. Was there anything about Jinbei's character that I've mentioned in this video that you didn't know about? I'd love to know all of your thoughts by continuing the discussion in the comments. Was there anything that I've forgotten to mention about Jinbei's past? And if you like this video and you want to see me cover more backstories, then please do leave your suggestions under the comments. If you're enjoying the regular One Piece content, then be sure to subscribe to the channel so that you can remain up to date on all of the latest One Piece videos and topics that I cover. Lastly, thank you for making it to the end of yet another One Piece video, and I can't wait to see you in my next one.
A massive thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters for helping to make this video possible. If you also want to support the channel and see your name in the end of my videos, then check out my Patreon, which has loads of perks like early video access and so much more. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.